Yeah, I know that.
He's talking about his
That
bright-
chartreuse shirt. Got you, didn't
Is that what chartreuse looks like?
We're on
It's like
live.
a bright yellow.
Mike's on. Just letting you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the City Commission regular meeting. Today is Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. It is 9:03 a.m. We're in the City Chambers. I call the City Commission regular meeting to order. Those present with me are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, myself, Mayor Hanks. Commissioner Emmerich is here. We also have Assistant City Manager Yarbrough. We have City Attorney Slayton. We have our Deputy City Clerk Taylor and our Recording Secretary Hale. A couple of reminders before we get started. Please make sure you turn your cell phones on vibrate. And anybody wishing to fill out a public comment card, please do so with the officer standing over here to my left. And with that, we had an invocation. They were not able to be here, so I will give it today, and then we'll do the pledge if Ms. McDowell would not mind doing that, please. Lord, as this Board of Commissioners meet this morning to serve our community, I pray that we use our resources wisely and we use them well, representing all members of our community fairly, making decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and our responsibility to the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and the community. As trusted servants, we seek blessing on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wise and well in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good morning, sunshine.
Who's in the corner?
Commissioner.
You wanna interrupt?
Commissioner Carasone is in the house. If I could get an approval of the agenda, please.
So moved?
I have a motion on the floor by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Carasone. Let's take a vote.
This is the quickest part of the meeting.
She was, and that is approved unanimously. We're going to move on to general business. Approval of Amendment 1, Agreement 2018-35 with Recreational Design and Construction, Inc., in the amount of $498,146.45 for the construction of an additional parking lot in support of the Northport Aquatic Center. Assistant City Manager.
Yes, Mayor, thank you so much. There was a lot of good discussion that came out of the agenda item last week. Staff's come up with answers to a lot of questions. I'm just going to kind of, out of respect for y'all's time, I'm going to just kind of get to the heart of the matter. If y'all want to do some alternative parking, you can go through the DMP process, which basically means you would go through staff review again. You would go through the Planning and Zoning Board, and then that issue, then you would have a community meeting, then it would come back to y'all for consideration. I've already talked to the stormwater manager. If you want to do alternatives such as grass or other alternatives other than asphalt, there's no environmental issues. There was a memo that I sent out this morning, prepared by Sandy Funheller, regarding a lot of the questions that came up in the meeting. So from an environmental perspective, you're good. Now, that being said, there are some operational issues. You're going to possibly have eventual rutting, balding of the grass. A lot of the material, the alternative material, depending on what you choose to use, can be walked in. So you may have some operational issues at the Water Aquatic Center itself. The other issue is if you choose to go that route, an alternative route, the folks that that are being brought before you, they're going to demobilize and move on. They're not going to wait around. That's not how this works. And in construction, time is money. So you're going to have to go out to bid. But that's not the end of the world. The Braves facility was operated under a temporary CO You can do the same thing here, and while you go and do your bidding and all that other kind of stuff. Just to kind of get to the heart of the matter, you've got options. You're not painted into a corner, and staff's here to answer any of your questions. So with that, I'll ask Sandy to come up, and there's other staff members here as well as your stormwater manager, and your NDS staff is also here to answer any of your questions you may have.
Back to us or back to Sandy?
I'm sorry, back to y'all, but I apologize.
Here to answer, okay.
But she's here to answer questions, sorry.
All right, so I saw the memo that came in bright and early this morning. No, it's all good. I appreciated the memo, answered a lot of the questions. So just for the public's consumption, because this is a hot topic item, can we just go through it real quickly? The question was, what about using shell and asphalt? Do we have a bid for that, or can we get a bid for shell and asphalt, and what are the pros and cons?
We don't have a bid for that. It was the amendment, sorry, Sandy Funheller, for the record, Director of Parks and Recreation. We moved forward with asphalt, so we would have to get that information. The project manager would need to do that. As far as any issues that we have with a shell parking lot, operationally, the shell parking lot is going to require a higher level of maintenance. They're generally recommended in areas that are low traffic. This is not going to be a low traffic area, so it will require public works facility maintenance to have a higher level of maintenance there. From the aquatic center operationally, it's likely that patrons would bring in the material from the gravel and shell parking lot. If that gets in the filtration system, that could be a problem, which means that we're just going to have a higher level of care and maintenance with the filtration system.
So you're saying that it's going to, this parking lot will be used a lot. I don't quite see it that way, but I'm not the pool expert or Parks and Rec expert. Is it possible to construct the grass parking and only have it open to be used when all the other parking is full? You know, so that it's like it's parking spots, but it has a rope on it and it can only be used when everything else is full, so that way then you can just take the rope off.
We certainly could. Operationally, it may be difficult to open it as soon as we know that the rest of the lot is full, but we can. I think from a public relations perspective, I don't know that would sit well. I'm not really sure how to put it, because it's right next to the aquatic center and we'd have it closed off, and I would think people would want to park probably as in close proximity as they could. I think we would probably get a lot of questions. Why can't we park there? Why is it blocked off? It's right next to the facility.
Can we waive the parking requirements? I know that we decided to go to what the consultant had advised as far as required parking spots, but developers get parking waived all the time. And I'm wondering, can we waive the parking?
I'm going to let Nicole Galehouse answer that.
Thank you.
Good morning.
And I know you answered it in the memo. I just want it for the record. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Nicole Galehouse, Planning Division Manager. The parking requirements, when they are waived for developers, they are typically done during the DMP process, Development Master Plan. Being that this is a government use property, it was not required to go through that process. That being said, there's nothing preventing you from going through that process in order to get those waivers. It has been done on other government use properties before.
But it's my understanding it's also gone through the SDR process, because that's, the SDR process is what alerted us to this parking issue.
It's going through the SDR process under a major site and development review, which does not have it's a staff level review. It does not, we don't have the authority to grant waivers to the code.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Carrison.
And
Just, do we have a price difference between shell and pavement? You know, how much would we save with shell versus,
I'm gonna ask our project manager to come up.
Derek Appleby, Project Management. I've tried to get that in the short notes, but I do not have the exact, everything but the shell is gonna be the same. The base will all be the same, the work will be the same, but the difference between the asphalt and shell I do not have yet.
because when we had a very, very lengthy discussion about the shell versus pavement issue, and I could have sworn that there was, I mean, at first it was pavement was less than shell, and then it became pavement was more than shell, and so I guess, you know, I would like to know what is the financial cost to this, but because we have to add on the annual maintenance as well, so, and then I also thought that if you look at the map, that this grass pavement that we talked about would actually be over by where it says 6, the number 6, over by, more towards the fields area. When we talked about grass pavement.
I'm not following what, I mean,
So,
on the map, the aerial map?
yeah, if you're
Okay.
looking at the aerial map and you see where you come in from the multi-purpose fields and you come behind or beside the aquatic center, I thought that's where we had kind of designated those grass pavement, or the grass parking. Is that changed?
The grass
Map off.
parking. Are you
Okay,
talking about
let's start
the new parking lot?
from the
Or-
beginning.
Okay.
The commission as a whole we were proposed that we were required an extra 60-something parking spaces. I did not agree, but the commission decided to go forward with the extra 62 parking spaces. Then we discussed the difference between shell, grass, or pavement. We got prices for all of those. In the end, we decided on shell, correct? And then when the design came back, we were told that shell / overflow parking per se was going to be in that area where it says number 6.
There was not that I recall, there was not a discussion about prices for shell, grass, and asphalt for this project. We had that discussion for Blue Ridge, and I believe probably the environmental, or the parking lot next to the skate park that we did not move forward with. I believe that's where we had that conversation. We've never moved forward to that
Okay,
point
so
with
you're
this
saying I'm
project.
getting confused with the two. It's a good possibility. I got news for you.
I'm sure that's probably a
It
good
is
bet.
a damn good possibility. Okay. So I guess we can't utilize those numbers to figure out what the difference between the shell and the, because that was so many years
Derek can
ago,
probably
huh?
speak to it a little bit better, but there were some differences with, there were certain areas at Blue Ridge that had to be concrete or asphalt because of ADA requirements. So
correct.
then when you added that in, it ended up being more than just doing the asphalt.
Right.
So I think that's maybe the conversation you're remembering.
Okay. I'm just, I remember us talking about a paved parking lot, but then I also remember us talking about, as far as the aquatic center, an area of overflow parking, which would just be either grass or shell. The whole parking lot being shell, I don't remember, but again, it's quite clear that my memory is not as good as it used to be. So, okay. Gonna fill the floor.
Commissioner Lute?
I appreciate the answers to the questions that came out. They were spot on.
Really appreciate it. I have operated an aquatic center before with the YMCA. I would hate to have shell out in the parking lot or grass clippings or muddy feet enter into the facility that I took care of. So I totally understand the pavement. The answer to question one was clarify the number of parking spaces available at Butler Park. The answer is you have 375 parking spaces. 74 of those would be grass. So you have a total of 301 parking spaces that's paved that can accommodate. I think that's very good because our staff wanted 363, but Kimley Horn said 184. So I think that's a great amount for us. I think worrying about grass parking for overflow is something that we can probably look at later if we find out that there's an issue. I don't see why we need to hold up progress with this. So this timing of this is the question I'm coming to. We need to act on paving this parking lot right now while we have these people out. Is that correct?
That would be ideal. Yes, that would be the best.
Otherwise, you're going through a longer process for just a handful of other parking spaces that probably wouldn't be effective in that environment, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. It's the only question that I have. A comment that I have, I heard on the radio some people talking about their favorite summer job. And one young man called in and said his favorite job was being a lifeguard one summer. He saved 26 children that summer. And so I hope we take lifeguarding seriously. Some of these kids were, 3 of them in a bowl, that went under. So I think we need to, make sure we look at this seriously. Thank you.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add about the shell, though, is if it is brought into the facility that people, little babies are walking around barefoot and they step on it, and it doesn't make for a happy experience either, let alone getting into the filtration systems and stuff. So I would, pardon me, I wouldn't be for shell anyway. So that's pretty much all I had on that.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, looking at the change order number 12. So this $98,000. It is for doing the parking lot. Is it to, I assume the electrical work is to put in the light poles?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I see landscaping. Is that landscaping for the parking area only, or is it the entire area of the pool itself landscaping?
This change order is for that parking space only, the parking lot. The landscaping for the pool has already been accounted for.
Is it possible? So if we have a bid, we'll call it for $500,000, 500,000 to make it simple. And this was for 68 parking spots, I believe. Could we cut it in half and have the other half grass? That'll give us 30-something plus extra asphalt parking to meet ADA requirements. The grass parking, believe me, will not be used unless it's absolutely necessary because it's not going to be asphalt, for a point that Commissioner Emmerich had brought up, and the filtration. I never thought of that point either, so thank you for that. I'm just wondering, let's cut the baby in half. Find a compromise.
You're using my words, cut the baby in half.
I did.
Not to speak for NDS, I apologize, but you could, I guess, we could issue a TCO and then go through the DMP process for the yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is in order to get the facility open as quickly as possible, I guess we could do a TCO, temporary certificate of occupancy, and then go through the DMP process to get the exemption.
There would be, though, probably a cost to redesign it.
That's what I was gonna ask.
There, RDC would not remain mobilized while we go through this process to do that, which is what we had just talked about, if we did the whole thing in grass. It'd be the same type of process.
So we'd have to go out to bid.
It's the requirement either that's
And
necessary.
it may need to go back to Swift Mud.
There'd be some minor modifications to it.
Okay, so it's already been designed for 68 parking spots. The design doesn't change anything because you're now gonna just be doing 34 parking spots and the rest is gonna be permeable, which is grass.
It's not my area of expertise, I'm gonna let Derek speak to it, but I would think it's going to need some level of redesign in order for whatever company constructs it to know exactly what they're doing.
So where's the pond gonna go that they have to excavate for a 68 parking spots?
Good morning, Elizabeth Wong, Stormwater Manager for the record. I'll answer those several questions. First question I heard is about permitting. The permitting has almost been completed, almost issued, right?
For
This
the
was my
parking?
permit? For
Yes.
parking?
Yes.
Yes. And this permit was issued for all asphalt, all concrete, completely impervious, okay? As part of that permitting, there is a small area that's, is near that gazebo at the far end of the pond that was excavated more in order to create storage volume. Okay, that's part of the design and that's part of the permit. So that answers that part in terms of the stormwater modification. Now, since the permit's been issued, it is very simple. If you want to reduce the number of parking spots from asphalt or concrete to grass, it is not a big deal in terms of permitting. Very quickly, it's a short form modification, right? And we already, that is assuming that we create that excavated area for the additional volume, because now we're being conservative, right? Grass is less, and the water goes down in the ground versus rolling off into the attenuation volume. So that permitting is not gonna be a problem. The design, I will also, if I may suggest, changing from asphalt to grass parking is not a huge design change. It's just a cross-section and a overall hatching to see where the grass area is. So that shouldn't take a lot of time, nor a lot of engineering design cost. Have I answered all the questions?
Yeah. Do you by chance have a picture of the map that you can put up on the screen?
They usually turn it on. There it is.
And while you're doing that, okay, great. So you see where it says proposed parking and it has an indentation going across it? What if you were to just cut that right there for the parking and then make everything towards the creek from that indentation towards the creek be the grass parking? Would you still be putting in I would assume you're gonna still put in the wheel stops because those wheel stops are already at Butler Field for the multipurpose. They already have some that have wheel stops over there.
But you may want to put, on grass parking, you want to put the wheel stops probably at a slant in order to minimize the amount of wheel turn, which will make divots.
Do they have divots and stuff over at Butler Field?
I'm just saying, staff's recommending, if you're gonna do grass, put the wheel stops at a slant so that the car's not making a 90-degree angle change in order to get into the parking. It's neither here nor there. My point being is that there
So
may
they
be a
wouldn't,
little.
what I'm
Angled at a
asking,
45?
Yeah, I think you're saying the harder you have to turn, the bigger the ruts are gonna
Correct.
be.
and while I appreciate that, I go by the
Just saying.
fields all the time and the already existing grass parking, either one, it's not used very much, it is overflow, or they don't have the divots that are being mentioned. So there's grass parking over there.
Where, Morgan or the?
By by Butler Field, towards,
Down at the bottom
nope,
of the
nope,
screen.
nope, go down, down, keep going down,
right
right there.
there.
That's grass parking,
Oh, wasn't that all redone with the facility?
but
Right?
it's grass.
It's grass.
I thought so. Yeah, but it was redone when we did the multi-purpose fields.
Correct.
Yes, it was.
So if we went with just doing half of it, the contract is still there. They would probably have to give us a bid. They could still be mobilized and do the work, knowing that only half of it's going to be grass and half of it's going to be concrete. They're still mobilized.
My understanding that was, we would still need to go through that
DMP,
DMP process.
in order to give yourself an exemption, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't open the facility under
If
a
we
temporary
can open
CO.
the facility, but as far as RDC staying on site mobilized, I can't answer that they would do that, because now we're gonna have a process that we have to go through that's going to lengthen the amount of time. So it absolutely can be done, it's just gonna take longer, because we'll have to most likely put it out to bid.
But that's not the end of the world.
And I know this is question time. I really want to make a comment since we're on this subject, but this is question time.
Are you good? I'll move on to Vanessa or
Yeah, if anybody else has a question.
Commissioner Carson?
With you, first of all, considering that the drainage has already been accounted for, I assume, in this parking lot, and I assume you would have to change the whole design, how much is that gonna cost in addition?
I couldn't even.
But it would
There
cost
would be some
extra.
costs, and Elizabeth is saying it shouldn't be, take a lot of time, but I don't know.
Well, I haven't gotten to the time yet. I'm looking at money.
And they'd have to provide that quote to us.
Okay. And then as far as the time, I get that the permits that Elizabeth is talking about is most likely state, as in Swift Mud and such, but we know that the city is a little slow, so, I mean, it's gonna take months to go through all of that process, right? The SDR, the Planning and Zoning Board, if they have a quorum that day, and then all of that to come back to us. We're looking at October, maybe? I mean, that's being very, nicely putting it.
Yeah, aggressively, because it does have to go to planning board and a neighborhood meeting would have to be held. An aggressive timeline would be about 8 weeks, but, that would
Remember,
be.
we don't meet in August.
Yeah, so you're probably looking at September at the earliest for that.
Okay. That's kind of what I was thinking. All right, 2 more questions, has nothing to do with this, going off the rails. Middle school parking, do we have something planned for transportation?
No, we do not.
So we'll have to discuss that during budget, I guess, huh? And then if you look at this map, you're gonna see where the multi-use fields are, the 5, 8, and 5 up where it enters into Price Boulevard. My grandchildren play Huskies, and I'm just gonna say we need to put some speed bumps in there.
It's actually being installed.
Okay, because it is a dangerous thing. All right, so when are the speed bumps coming in?
I've talked to facilities maintenance, I believe that's actually going in today.
Oh, no way.
Look at that.
Look at
Something
that.
happens.
Mind readers,
Commissioner
you.
Carson with that kind of authority.
All right.
We had discussed it previously.
You know, I thought we did,
We
but I
did,
couldn't,
yeah.
again, memory, not good.
Citizens brought it to our attention, it was brought forward, so
I
thank you
thought
for
so.
doing so.
Okay, thank you. That's it, I'm done.
Okay. Commissioner Luke?
I'm happy with speed bumps. I hate speed bumps, but I'm happy with those.
Grass parking doesn't count for the number, correct? That was stated previously.
which number, are you talking about the 371 or the?
Required number.
Those requirements, because it's been stated previously, grass parking lots, parking spaces don't count when you're looking at what's needed for the aquatic center.
That's correct. There's a provision.
Okay,
in the code.
thank you. So if we needed 62 more lots in order to fulfill what we needed for the planning of this, we cannot make it just 31 or 34 less, because we needed that 62 in order to fulfill what was necessary for the design.
Correct.
And, thank you. So to me, you can't. It's in the design. We did last time plan on getting it to that point of design that we needed to, but at the minimal point. If you wanted to talk about grass parking between what we needed and then way up to that 380 some or whatever, or 62 that the NDS said, fine. But when you're talking about what is necessary for the design, that 62 that needed to be paved, I don't know why we're discussing this any further, so thank you for the answers.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, last set of questions.
That's right.
You said speed bumps are being installed over by where the Huskies are. I know this is off topic, but she brought it up, so I need to know where exactly are those going, because I hope it's going to be throughout that entire complex.
I really can't speak to, I talked with Bud Katzman this morning about the installation of those. I know that it's going up there in that area where we've had the damage done to the fencing.
Are they putting any over by, and you can't see where I'm pointing, but see where the curve is?
To my understanding, it's gonna be
Right around there?
between right here, back towards Price,
Okay,
For right now.
so there is going to be one up around that curve part?
up in this area here.
There's one there, you said?
Other way.
Yeah.
Okay,
Going-
keep going, keep going, keep going, right
Down
there.
in
Is
here.
there going to be one in that general area?
I don't know this to go that far. I
think
can
it
absolutely
needs it.
ask that we install an additional one if that's an item of concern, or we can go up to maybe the launch, the kayak
Well,
launch.
the reason why I'm asking is because there is a crosswalk right there.
Correct.
At that curve, and that's where a lot of the damage is, because people come and take that curve too quickly.
Right, and that was this area here. And
Correct.
we're definitely covering up to that area. I just don't know how much further beyond that they're gonna go.
Well, you got to get it from people coming.
I will bring that to them, absolutely, today.
It's not just people going this way that
Right.
need to slow down, it's people going that way that need to
Correct.
slow down too. Okay,
Where do you assume that crosswalk is? Because I
The
only
crosswalk
see
is
the
actually-
one,
there is a crosswalk
There's
right
right
there.
here.
Yes,
and you said the speed bump is going beyond that, right?
no,
Around there. He said it's right around that area.
Okay.
So we can probably install a few additionals if we want to hit the traffic going towards Price
Oh, I
Street.
get you, going
Yeah,
towards
need one-
Price, okay.
Need one on both sides.
Logical to put one
Took me a
going,
minute.
because it is a curve, you can't see that the bump is there until you get around. So, yeah, I would put it on each end of the curve.
Yep.
right. I'll wait until the motion to make my comment. Thank you, Mayor. I just had to piggyback off what she had asked. Oh, there was another thing. She said something about transportation from I'm sorry, Commissioner Carasone, I'm sorry. Commissioner Carasone had said from the middle school over to the Morgan Center, transportation, what's that?
When we had the aquatic center discussion, I can't remember which one it was, but there was some discussion about should we provide a shuttle service from the Heron Creek lot over to the aquatic center for patrons. It didn't go any farther than that discussion. We have not looked into it. There's not staffing right now to be able to do that. So if that's something you wanted to discuss at budget, we would have to look into that and get more information.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve amendment number 1 to agreement number 2018-35 with Recreational Design and Construction, Inc. in the amount of $498,146.45 for the construction of the additional parking lot in support of the Northport Aquatic Center.
I'm gonna second, but I do have one more minor question after.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Commissioner Carasone. Commissioner Luke, you have anything to that motion?
No, to me, it's no-brainer. This is what we put in motion. You guys have brought forth what we asked and what we needed in order to open the doors of the aquatic center. So I don't see why we'd be changing it right now. We're just doing what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
Yeah, two things. I know that there was a conversation, or we got an email earlier about the timeline, how all these change orders are gonna add to the timeline. Are we looking at August now before we're gonna open?
We don't have an opening date. The purpose of the memo was to let you know that the contractual completion date has changed because of the change orders. However, our project manager has been working with them every day and hoping to keep that timeline as tight as possible.
Try to keep it within the July timeframe.
We're hoping, but we also need to coordinate staff training.
The weather's coming now.
Right, hiring
that's my
staff,
concern,
training staff,
you
getting
know.
all the furniture, fixtures, equipment, so we're trying to coordinate both together to make sure that we are prepared to open and it's safe to open.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious about that.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yeah, I just can't support this at this time right now. I don't know if we have the need for all this extra parking, you know, unless it would be grass and then, you know, we could see next year. I don't know what the visitation is gonna be or whatnot, and I think the money can be used in other areas throughout Parks and Rec, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Emmerich. Vice Mayor?
So here's my comment part. This is the same contractor that is currently doing the pool. Back in April of 2018 was the last time we had discussion on this parking. It has now been a year and 2 months later, and we're just now seeing this. It did not have to go out to bid. I would have hoped that this conversation would have come back much sooner than it did. So that way then we could say, hey, we have time to go through the DMP process. Hey, we have time to do a waiver. Hey, we have time to get another quote. I am just very disappointed that this is basically putting our backs against the wall to put in this parking and not have any other options. And that is what I find very disheartening, because there was time to really vet this. And because that wasn't used correctly that time, we are now either do this or we're gonna be delayed. We'll have to remobilize, we'll have to do this, we'll have to do that. I'm just very disappointed in that. So take it for what it's worth. Thank you.
Commissioner Luke?
And see, I don't see it the same way. When we discussed the parking, we knew we were short in order to have the design that was told to us that we had to have in order to open the park to start with. Because of the capacity load of the park, you have to have a certain amount of parking spaces. Again, grass parking doesn't count. So you can't just say, oh, we're not gonna have any, we're gonna have the grass there, and we can open it because we've got this maybe parking spots. I mean, it is upon us, because we chose to have this aquatic center, to make sure that the construction and the design is adequate to fit according to what is the design requires. I don't see how or why we're trying to make it more difficult than what we already put on the table, asking that those parking spaces be put in so that we could have this aquatic center. If you want it, you have to put everything to it in order for it to operate the way that it was designed. What are we gonna do? Wait a year and a half and say, oh my goodness, we need more parking spaces? And then run through it all again and have more costs go out? Actually, it probably shouldn't even be allowed to open if you don't have the adequate parking spaces. I think we're cutting our noses off trying to save $200,000 when this friggin' thing costs $12 million. I mean, why try to save a penny when you're spending $1 million? So to me, it's illogical to go against putting this in at this point in time so that it can function as this commission chose that they wanted that aquatic center.
Thank you, Commissioner. I agree with Commissioner Luke. I think you know, there's phases, there's time frames, there's a lot of things that go on. So whenever you're in the construction field and you know, there's timing for everything. And I think this parking coming up now is because of phasing and timing. And though it, you know, could be nice to have earlier, this is just the way it works. And it is frustrating to a degree, but what are you going to do about it? But also, whenever you're looking at the construction of this, I think if we put this off, I think in 6 months, we're going to say how we needed that additional parking that we had agreed to do in the beginning. And then it's going to cost us a third more just to have, or more, just to have it redone. So I'm in full support of completing this parking area the way it's supposed to be done.
Can I just
Vice-
jump off of that when you're done?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know what? I hear both of you, and that's why I'm supporting it at this time. And the reason is, because I didn't really talk to the question at hand. I have said repeatedly, we have got to stop saving 10 cents to spend $20 down the road. And that's what I see this as, is that while we would save the, say, 300, 200,000, because it's all gonna cost money to redo the
Permit,
design,
redesign,
re-permit, the whole process, it's all gonna cost money. So when you're done with it, you may save yourself 200,000 if you're lucky. And to be quite honest with you, you know, those days have got to end, because there are a lot of things that we are trying to address now, you know, 20 to 30 years later, because of that mentality. And it's gotta stop somewhere. So that's why I support it.
Well, we do that consistently with our road and drainage and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
exactly.
And you know, we keep holding them down, and then all of a sudden you gotta pull that Band-Aid off. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that has been said, is that, yes, we need this parking. Yes, we knew this parking was coming. My point was only a year and 2 months ago, we had the conversation and we talked about, hey, what about doing grass parking? Oh, we'll have to bring that information back. Hey, can we do a waiver? We'll have to bring that information back. Hey, can we do whatever else we discussed? And this is all we got, was to do the asphalt. So we never had a secondary conversation before approving this contract. Yes, we have to have this parking, we know that. It just would have been nice to be able to have another conversation when our backs weren't against the wall of, hey, we know we have to do this, and now we're doing it. I definitely agree, do it, we're gonna do it all. That way then we don't have to come back and do it halfway now and half again later. It's just another option to discuss that we could have discussed with more information had we had more time. That's all I was trying to get at. So, when is the playground going to go in?
The playground had to go back out, it's going to go back out for a request for proposals. The first request for proposals that went out, we had intended that it would be done in time to open with the aquatic center. However, there was a challenge to the bid by one of the companies. It had to be sourced out to a legal review, and we had to cancel the bid, and we have to reissue it.
Okay, and the only reason why I'm asking that is because if the playground was going to be constructed at the same time as the parking, you would have a conflict. So now we're going to have a parking area that is going to become a construction zone for the playground, correct? So that they can mobilize to install the playground.
The playground should not be, it won't affect the parking, and the parking won't affect the playground. They are side by side, but we have a staging area that will accommodate the future playground.
But when the playground is under construction, so what I think I'm hearing is the parking, if we approve this today,
Correct.
will be done. You still have to go out for bid for the playground. So the parking lot's gonna be finished before the playground is constructed.
Correct.
Okay, so where are they going to mobilize to do the construction for the new playground? They're going to be using the parking lot, right?
Well, I'm not gonna let them park vehicles for construction over here. We'll use this area over here to stage.
And truck all the way up to the
Yes.
playground?
Yes.
We're paying them for.
Yeah,
They'll
they're
use
not gonna,
go-karts.
we're not gonna use our prime parking for the aquatic center to use the stage for construction of the playground.
And they're going to redo all that area after the construction of the playground then? Because that's going to be trashed.
They'll, for the little bit, they'll need a Bobcat, not a lot of equipment, but yes, they will make sure, that's always in the contract, that they replace any damaged materials.
And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is I have citizens asking, when is the playground going back in? So, thank
It'll
you.
be a Bobcat, it won't be no heavy equipment, it'll just be a Bobcat with a nogging machine on it.
Thank you.
All right, let's take the vote. And that passes 4-1 with Commissioner Emmerich dissenting. Commissioner Emmerich?
You just stated.
All right, there we have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor, do we have any public comment?
I don't have any cards, no.
All right, we're gonna move on then. We'll move on to announcements. City Clerk, please read announcements into the record.
The current vacancies for the following boards and committees include the Art Advisory Board, Audit Committee, Beautification and Tree Scenic Highway Committee, Charter Review Advisory Board, Citizens Tax Oversight Committee, Community Economic Development Advisory Board, Environmental Advisory Board, Historic and Cultural Advisory Board, Joint Management Advisory Board, Northport Police Officers Pension Board of Trustees, Northport Youth Council, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Planning and Zoning Advisory Board, Public Utilities Advisory Board, Zoning Board of Appeals. The upcoming expirations for the following advisory boards and committees: Art Advisory Board. 1 Northport resident to serve on the Sarasota Manatee Metropolitan Planning Organization's Tamiami Trail Scenic Highway Committee. If anyone would like more information, please see the city clerk's office. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor? We're moving on to consent agenda. City Manager, do we have anything pulled for discussion?
I don't think we've been notified of anything being pulled.
Okay. Then I will
To approve. Second.
have a motion on the floor to approve consent, seconded by the Vice Mayor, motion by Commissioner Carusone.
Press your button, Commissioner Carson.
Oh, it wasn't there before.
Right, let's take the vote.
I seconded it.
You
We
moved
got
it.
Hold on one second.
You moved it, they're fixing
There
it.
we go.
Don't worry, they got your back. There we go. That approves unanimously.
Can I say something
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
consent? I really appreciate the youth council member who wrote us the email in order to introduce himself. I thought that was really
It's
cute.
really awesome.
Appreciate all the youth who stepped forward and those who are volunteering to be on the other advisory boards too. I thank them.
Just so you know, there was a youth that sent me an email. I had Katie send it to all you guys because he wanted to be here to introduce himself, but he wasn't able to.
Yeah,
because
that's
of a
the one
field
I was
trip.
talking
Oh,
about.
okay, yeah, good.
And I think we now have a quorum so they can get started.
Yeah, yeah,
So that'd be awesome.
all right. We'll move on to presentations. City Manager, please introduce the item.
Mayor, I'm going to ask Rick Newkirk, Utilities Director, to come up and speak and introduce our consultant.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Newkirk. I'm the Utilities Director. I'd like to thank you for allowing us to do a presentation today. We've worked for a long time and very hard on this rate analysis right here. And with me today, I have Brian Mantz from GovRates, Inc. He comes all the way from Orlando to be with us. It's been a really good project that we worked on, but we put a lot of time and study into it. And with that, I'll let Brian take over with the presentation, and then we'll be ready to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, good morning. For the record, I'm Brian Mantz from GovRates Incorporated, and I'm here to give a not-to-exceed 15-minute presentation on the utility rate analysis
my timer.
results. So Northport Utilities provides an essential service on a continuous basis where public health and safety is the primary objective. It's also a very highly regulated entity. We're regulated by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and the Florida Department of Health. And the permits issued by these regulatory agencies require satisfactory operating performance. The utility operations are also accounted for in an enterprise fund, and the purpose of enterprise funds is to account for business-like activities where operations are primarily funded through monthly user rates. And the utility is the city's largest business. You have over $180 million original costs of installed assets under city management. There are a lot of major cost drivers affecting the utility system. Operating expenses are projected to continue increasing. The Congressional Budget Office has projections of the National Consumer Price Index of 2.3% to 2.6% over the next 10 years. Also, due to the regulatory environment and the capital-intensive nature of utility operations and commodity cost increases such as electricity, chemicals, fuel, et cetera, utility costs typically increase at higher rates than general inflation. We have to consider increases from Peace River, which supplies a portion of the utility's water. We've also recognized 12 additional personnel above 2020 budgeted levels for the following 9 years, again through 2029. And that's just to continue to accommodate growth and maintain the utility's level of service. We also need to have had to recognize incremental operating expenses associated with some developer contributed treatment facilities. We have about a $161 million capital improvement program recognized again through the next 11 years. And about $65.8 million of this is for water and wastewater treatment facilities that are being contributed by the developers. It also includes upgrades to treatment and transmission utility infrastructure to continue providing reliable water and wastewater service. It includes replacements and rehabilitations of utility assets reaching the end of the service lives, and also vehicles, equipment, and other departmental capital. It is important to note that over 40% of these capital needs are projected to be funded through developer contributions and surtaxes, with the remainder to be funded primarily through capacity fees, rates, and fund balances. So when we're looking at the financial forecast and the identification of revenue requirements, which is basically the expenditures and transfers that we need to recover through our revenues, we have to take a look at, we have to consider operations and maintenance expenses, the utility's existing and any proposed debt service, capital improvement program and asset management, any administrative transfers and reserve allowances. All these different elements make up the annual revenue requirements that we have to recover through our revenues. So our recommendations for the next 3 years, and that's the window we're looking at for commission consideration, is some 4% water adjustments across the board, 2% wastewater adjustments. That's combined are inflationary, essentially inflationary 3% adjustments. When we consider the dollar amount of these increases, it's for just 2020, it's about an extra $2.20 for the average user of 3,000 gallons per month. There are about 4,000 customers that have water-only service. Their monthly increase would be about $1.23 per month. So when we look at the total bill and divide it by the number of gallons, then sometimes it's to get some perspective, it's good to look at a cost per gallon basis. So when you take the total bill divided by 3,000 gallons, for water and wastewater service, that equates to about a 2.7 cents per gallon. So when you consider the 2.7 cents compared to a gallon of, say, bottled water or a gallon of milk, it gives you a lot of perspective on the kind of value you get through public water and wastewater service. Best financial management practices are that smaller incremental increases over time help to avoid future rate shock and higher catch-up rate increases. I've worked with communities that have actually been facing a 100% rate adjustment with no operating reserves to phase it in over time, and it's not a fun time for everyone involved. With respect to projected financial position, these charts here, the primary indicators that we want to look at are unrestricted cash balances and debt service coverage. We want to set some targets and meet those targets. We've, with respect to unrestricted cash balances, we've kind of recognized a 120 days of rate revenue plus 1 year of annual depreciation expense as a target. Over the long term, we think 1 year's days days cash on hand would be a good long-term target for the utility. With respect to debt service coverage, we think 200% is a reasonable target. And in the initial years of the forecast period, we're below the target, but as some of our existing debt comes offline, we're anticipating to meet that target. There are financial risks of not adjusting rates at this time. Of course, as I mentioned, I've worked with utilities that have been facing larger increases, for having deferred rate adjustments, and certainly the risk is an inability to fund all revenue requirements, fund your capital program, meet your debt service requirements, and meet financial targets. And user rates may be higher in the future because the capital needs of the system are not anticipated to go away, but they may be more expensive to address in the future because inflation and the cost of construction could continue to affect system costs. So these two charts here, again, we talked about cash and debt service coverage. These two charts here show what would happen if we just took absolutely no action at all. And as you see, we couldn't fund the capital program or any of our operations as scheduled, and we quickly run out of cash, and then we'd run into a debt service coverage problem, which would debt service coverage is your net revenues divided by your annual debt service, and we could run into some problems with the utilities lenders. With respect to how the rates compare with those of other utilities, the position of Northport over time has not really changed that much. As you can see, you're among Peace River customers. You're between Sarasota County and Charlotte County. You're quite a bit below DeSoto County. But a key takeaway from this chart here is that all the utilities with a little asterisk next to them are they either have a rate schedule, rate increases already planned, or they're doing in the process of a rate study, or they're planning to index their rates. So the takeaway is that everyone else is in the process of reviewing their rates, and so again, the rates are going to just continue to shift along with the cities. With respect to water and wastewater capacity fees, they are calculated based on the cost of installed assets available to serve new growth, as well as the multi-year capital improvement program. We're recommending a reduced level of service based on a review of customer statistics and historical flows. We're recommending that the water level of service be decreased from 250 gallons per day to 170 gallons per day per equivalent residential connection. On the wastewater side, we're recommending a decrease from 225 gallons per day per ERC to 155 gallons per day. And although the cost per unit of capacity is higher than what was calculated in previous analyses, the overall calculated fees are lower because of the lower level of service standards. And as you can see, we're looking at about an 8.5% overall decrease for water and wastewater capacity fees. With respect to how the city's capacity fees compare with those of others, as you can see, with the reduced capacity fees, the relative position of the city on this capacity fee comparison remains unchanged, and you're right around the average of where others are, and that's probably a good place to be. With respect to other charges with the utility rate analysis, we have several considerations. One is the current utility costs to provide service. Another consideration is a comparison with similar charges that other utilities, Florida utilities charge, and also city policies. And it is important to note that to the extent that these other charges do not recover the cost of providing services, the cost difference must be paid through monthly user rates. There are some, with respect to some significant changes for your consideration, we have a new new West Villages bulk reclaimed water rate calculated at 21 cents for 1,000 gallons. We're recommending a change. Currently, the city charges for meter installations that requiring a tap into the mains. Right now, the city has separate fees for whether the house is, whether boring is required on the road if the house is on the opposite side from where the water main is. We're proposing an averaging approach so that you're not, so that there's no change, you're not penalized for being on the wrong side of the road. That's a very common philosophy that a lot of utilities decide to sign up for. They like that averaging approach. Guaranteed revenue charges, these are charges that after impact fees are paid, the units that have not yet connected to the system are charged guaranteed revenue charges, recognizing that the utility has to incur certain fixed costs to keep these customers, to maintain the infrastructure in a ready-to-serve conditions for when these units finally come on. We're recognizing a increase in the guaranteed, we're recognizing to link the guaranteed revenue charges to the monthly base charges. And also the bulk water rate, the calculation increases by 1.6%. We've also recognized the addition of a 15% surcharge for customers outside the city. That is, unless otherwise set by contract, the 15% surcharge is currently charged to all customers outside the city, and we're just applying it also to the bulk water rate. So, requested commission action. We're requesting that you direct staff to bring back to the commission a resolution and ordinance incorporating the utility rate analysis recommendations. We have a recommendation to adopt the proposed user rates for the fiscal years 2020 to 2022 to help ensure full cost recovery and addressed capital needs. And we do recommend the continued practice of annual rate index in the absence of a utility rate analysis recommendation. We do have a recommendation to adopt the proposed lower capacity fees that again are about 8.5% lower. We have a recommendation to adopt the proposed other miscellaneous charges. Certainly we want to continue monitoring actual versus projected financial results and to reevaluate the user rates and financial forecast in 2 to 3 years to monitor changes in economic conditions, customer usage trends, the regulatory environment, et cetera. So hopefully that was less than 15 minutes.
You're right on the minute.
Yeah.
15 minutes.
That was good.
It was good, right on the minute. Okay, thank you very much. Vice Mayor McDowell.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I also have to thank staff for the meeting that I had with them. And this question is actually based on my page 6 of the PowerPoint, if you could go to that.
Okay.
And Mr. Newkirk, I'm with you. You are requesting, you are recommending a 4% increase in water. And you are recommending a 2% increase in wastewater. 4% plus 2% is 6, not 3. Because it says a combined system adjustment. It's not saying an average. You're recommending 4% for water, 2% for wastewater.
If you consider your water bill and your wastewater bill, if your water goes up 4% and your wastewater bill goes up 2%, then the overall, if you take your sum, it'll be a 3% adjustment.
Okay, 4% and 2%, and the sum is 6. 4 plus 2 is 6. It's a 6% increase.
Yeah, but to find an average, it's.
But it's not
6
averaged.
divided by 2.
But it's not averaged. It says combined, and I need to get the clarification because there is a difference.
If you have water and wastewater, if you have only water service, you'd have a 4% increase. If you have both water and wastewater service, since a portion of your bill is going up 4% and a portion is only going up 2%, the combined portion, the water plus the wastewater is going up 3%.
If I only have a water bill, it's going up 4%.
That is correct.
Okay. But I have water and sewer. So water is going up 4%, Sewer is going up 2%.
Averaged is 3%.
It's not
Average of the three.
averaged. There's nothing averaging.
Yes. Sorry, I don't mean to be passionate about this, but it is.
If the price of gas goes up 4% and the price of milk goes up 2%, I have a 6% increase in gas and milk.
If I may, if I could.
Go ahead, jump in there, Jennifer.
Thank you. Jennifer DeRocher, Assistant Utilities Director. The difference is that water currently is a much lower cost than wastewater. So the percentages are added on to the existing rates, water and wastewater. If water costs you $20, your 4% is going to be based on the $20. Your 2% may be based on $30 on the wastewater side. So when you actually combine those and do that math, the total is 3%. And we could show you an example of that. I don't have
If
one.
I had it in
I'm
Excel-
moving on because
If we had an Excel, I could show you.
Bottom line is it's cheap. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that it's cheap and inexpensive for such a life-giving resource. That's the bottom line.
all right, I'm going to move on that one. You prompted that question because I went back and looked at it, and I'm with you on that. All right, page 10 is construction, capacity fees. So I'm trying to understand, why are we lowering our level of service, and capacity fees are kind of like impact fees, cost of construction for if we had to build something to add capacity keeps going up. Why are we lowering level of service?
The costs have continued to go up, but the issue, the current levels of service were based on a lot of assumptions, old master planning assumptions where they assumed that the persons per household would go up and also that the usage per customer would also increase. But that has not come to fruition. And so we've recognized the need to kind of right-size the levels of service accordingly.
So as things get more efficient, your plant can service more and more people even though you're not adding tankage.
So our plant efficiencies are allowing it to decrease level of service?
More and more people can be serviced by the same tankage at the plant because people are using less water, because their appliances are more efficient. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. All righty. Says West Villages is going to pay 21 cents per 1,000 gallons, but the rest of our reclaimed water customers are staying at 55 cents. Can you help me understand that difference?
It's a bulk reclaimed water rate, and it's only recovering the city's costs, and then and that would then be resold to, then West Villages would then resell the reclaim to their customers. It's a bulk reclaimed water rate, not a standard reclaimed water rate.
So I'm trying to put this in perspective. Regular customers, our current reclaimed water customers, aren't they?
But the Villages is also responsible for the pipes, whereas we're responsible for the pipes on our, you know.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, West Villages, they're only going to this point, and everything
Right.
from that point on
Their
is theirs,
responsibility.
whereas for us, that point is here.
Correct.
Gotcha. All right. Gonna skip over to, in the report itself, and this might be something we have to discuss at budget, I'm not 100% sure. In the report, it says general fund admin charge of 5% per year, and then return of investment is 5% per year, and then jumping ahead in the report, it gives a breakdown that the payment to the general fund is 1.5 million-ish, and the return on the investment is like $425,000. I'm trying to understand, what are those two fees? What are those two expenses?
Well,
And I don't know if you can answer that.
I can
Okay.
definitely, I mean, Those are a management decision for the city, but usually these types of charges are are considered indirect cost reimbursements, so that, for example, they would recover a portion of the commission's time to spend on utility matters. The finance departments, all the general fund departments that provide benefit to the utility, these kinds of fees help to offset the costs of those. Those types of fees are intended to indirectly reimbursed the general fund for costs for costs of services provided to the general fund, to the utility by the general fund that provide benefit to the utility. And it is as far as a return on investment, it is a management decision of the city. Florida law does recognize Florida case law has recognized the right of public utilities to earn a return on investment. To the extent that those monies are not transferred to the general fund, you may have to have some sort of corresponding increase in your millage rate to offset that revenue. So it's again, it's a management decision of the city, and it's whatever the direction is.
So this sounds like I'm gonna have to raise this during budget talks, because a ratepayer, the utility customers are paying this return on the investment. And we'll say only, for lack of another term, 1/3 of the parcels in the city of Northport is ratepayers to the utility department, and they are paying $400,000 to the general fund, but they're also taxpayers. So the rest of the city is getting that benefit that the utility customers are paying, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, if I may. You have FP&L provides you electricity.
I
And if
understand.
the water utility is a private, you would have a franchise. Like, for example, I think every dollar of charge for FP&L, 7 cents of that is a franchise fee that's paid back to the city. So, you could also use that model for the water department. If it was a private utility, you would potentially be charging a franchise fee on that. In this case, we do a return on investment. If the water department was privatized, then they'd have to have their own finance department, their own purchasing department. And those costs are allocated and shared. So they would have a cost associated with providing those services, whereas they get that benefit from the city now. So why shouldn't they pay their fair share of those services, which they would have to provide anyway if they were a private company?
And I understand that.
But as far as the return on investment, you can think of it as a franchise fee. You charge FP&L a franchise fee for doing business inside the city, and then that money's transferred into the general fund.
And I agree with that. FPL, every parcel in the city that's improved has to have electricity. And that's citywide. But not everybody citywide is a utilities customer. So the utilities customers are basically supplementing the general fund, $400,000 for the benefit citywide.
I understand.
That's.
Not to kick the can down the road, but maybe this is a budget discussion.
I'm concerned about that. I have just a couple more if you want me to continue, Mayor, or do you want to take somebody else? I do have a couple more, though.
Go ahead and do your
Okay.
couple more. 'Cause you're right on.
CPI versus the ENR. I understand CPI, I understand what that means. I understand that Miami-Dade is no longer called Miami-Dade, and that you're recommending that we go to the ENR. My question is, this ERN,
In the ENR,
ENR, whatever, is that a national average, or is that based on a locale?
it is a national average, and utilities are considered one of the most capital-intensive businesses, and so it's appropriate to. No, I don't want to say there's anything wrong with using the local CPI. It is used quite a bit. However, like I said, the utilities are one of the most capital-intensive of businesses, and the ENR Construction Cost Index is linked to the actual cost of construction, and so it's appropriate to link an index. A lot of utilities have moved away from a local CPI to the ENR Construction Cost Index because they found that the local CPI was not a good indicator of the cost to provide the utility service. A lot of local CPIs, whether it's a national CPI or a local CPI, it's based on this hypothetical cost of goods and services, and a lot of the things that they put in the goods and services are not really related to utility service, such as food and apparel or clothing, and so whereas the ENR Construction Cost Index is specifically linked to the cost of construction, which is of construction cost materials, which are driven by a lot of global market factors. For example, when China, for example, cornered the market on a lot of construction cost materials when they were building the Olympics stadium in 2008. So the ENR Construction Cost Index is probably a more relevant index for utility service than just the national, either local or national CPI.
So after 2022, fiscal year 2022, when we go from the 4%, 2% rate increase, it's going to go by the ENR increases for rates?
Well, the recommendation would be to look at the rates again in 3 years. For a lot of, we're taking a look at a 10-year forecast period, but we certainly recommend, usually with utilities, anything beyond 2 or 3 years is kind of difficult to plan for. And so we would recommend a formal rate study again in 2 or 3 years. And rather than, because what you want to do in these rate studies is not just, you want to look at, whether one system is more deficient than another and kind of right-size the difference or have a long-term plan to gradually make each system whole. And so that's what these rate studies do, rather than just adjust all rates the same percentage.
Right, and I would agree that every 3 years we have to do a rate study, but there was a few years that there wasn't a rate study done, that it automatically deferred then to the
Right.
CPI. So if we don't do a rate study, it would automatically defer to, based on this recommendation, to go to ENR.
Right.
We don't know what that trend looks like for ENR comparing it to CPI. So I would really like to see that.
Over the long term, if you look at, in the report, there's a little table on that shows a lot of the trends in the.
It's on page ES2.
Is it? Okay. Over the long term, the ENR Construction Cost Index has been between 2.5% and 3% per year. So interestingly enough, over the past year, the ENR Construction Cost Index and the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach Index they're roughly the same.
Yeah, and looking at that same table though, the ENR may be 2.5%, but the CPI, which doesn't show Miami-Dade, it only shows national, is only 1.9.
Right, as I mentioned, it's a little bit lower, and as I mentioned, a lot of utilities have recognized that the CPI is not really appropriately recovering the changes in utility costs, and that's why they've switched to the ENR Construction Cost Index.
All right. Last one. Some of the big changes that you had listed did not include the change to the deposits, and it did not include the changes to the activation. And I don't know if that's a conversation we have at budget for the fee schedule, but that concerns me, and I'm curious if we increase the amount of deposits. Let's say I'm a new customer and I'm just signing up and I have to pay a new deposit. but Mayor Hanks is an existing water customer, does he have to pay that additional deposit?
I'm their favorite, so no.
Well, as I don't believe that.
Oh, does that
residential-
apply? I don't know.
Do you want to say?
Sure. So currently, we do not charge any residential deposits at all. This is only for commercial, and it's for, if we would need to do an additional deposit on a commercial that didn't have good payment history. And the reason why, I can see your question face there, so the reason why we don't charge a deposit is we would be required to return that money in 23 months per state statute. So because we do liens here, if, if the payment goes unpaid or the bill goes unpaid after 120 days, we actually lien the property. We haven't charged deposits since 2008, actually. when it
And the
changed.
reason why I'm asking that is it's in the study, it says customer deposits, current existing deposit $60, and you're proposing to increase it to 65.
Yes, ma'am, that's for, if it's a additional, for a poor payment history on the residential side, and it's for commercial deposits. And it will be in part of the miscellaneous fee ordinance that comes back to you.
So we'll have that discussion at that time. But I saw that change, and to me, that is a significant change, so I didn't know you don't charge your deposits. Okay.
Well, the deposits are really just a liability, and they'll eventually be
Right, they have to be repaid.
repaid. So it's really a liability to the utility.
Glad I asked that question, thank you. I'm finished for now, Mayor, yes.
Commissioner Carson?
Going from the CPI to the ENR, we don't have, is the cost difference, it's not actually accounted for in this study, correct? Sorry, guys.
Let me start over. Going from the CPI to the ENR cost index, that is not accounted for in this study, is that correct?
The percentages that we're showing in the
Study
for the next 3 years include inflationary allowances.
includes
So
what?
the 4% and the 2% and the combined 3% include all the inflation already,
Of CPI?
Mhm.
Okay.
yes.
What is the increase of when we move over to ENR? Let me put it to you this way. If we moved over to ENR today, how much is it going to be more than using CPI? Let me do it that way.
There's going to be no difference in the projections whether you use the projections are already include inflationary adjustments. We've included inflation in all of our projections. The ENR and the ENR construction cost index, the index would only be in the absence of a rate study recommendation. Right now, we have a forecast, spanning 10 years that already includes all the inflationary allowances. So there would be no change in what's presented to you today with the change in the inflationary adjustment.
So why are we changing it? I don't get it. Like, if this isn't being accounted for in the study, if it means nothing in this study, unless, of course, we don't do a study.
Unless you
then
don't do a study,
what's the
that's right.
point?
It's
You know what I mean?
it's just the intent of changing to the ENR construction cost index is to more closely track the changes in utility service and help prevent help keep the utility help keep the utility rates kind of increasing commensurate with the utility costs.
So it does associate with increasing the rates.
In the absence of a rate study recommendation, it does.
Let's say we don't approve this rate study, or we do a morphed rate study, then does it go to ENR versus CPI? Because essentially, it's not the study, it's something different.
The
Doesn't matter. Study's a study.
study, The projections include inflationary allowances. For example, in the study, some costs are assumed to increase by the Congressional Budget Office inflationary projections. Some costs are being, like repair costs are assumed to increase by 4% per year. Every single cost that's included in the study for every single cost in making the projections, we look at what is driving the cost. What are the fundamental drivers? I mean, for example, electricity, chemicals, we're projecting them at a higher rate than general inflation. So all those different factors are included in all of the different, each expenditure line item is looked at carefully, and then and some sort of escalation references included into it. So we use a whole variety of inflationary, a whole variety of cost escalation factors in trying to derive these recommendations.
Okay, I see I'm not getting an answer to this.
Okay.
I might be able to help here. So what we would like to bring back is the resolution, which would incorporate those 3 years of rate increases. And then we would also ask to continue the CPI adjustment, which would now go to ENR versus the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, to incorporate the everything that Brian had talked about before. And that would only be effective in a year where a rate increase was not recommended. So if you're doing effective rate increases through 2021, it would only be effective for 2022 and beyond if we did not do another rate analysis at that time.
Okay, but again, how do we know what the
increase-
cause and effect is on 2022 by doing that?
You won't, but wouldn't you rather have an escalator that's more tied to the true cost of providing service to, in the utility business, you have millions and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of construction, and the ENR is more tied to that, which is a larger cost factor for providing the service, versus the CPI, which has got bread and clothes.
So you're saying the CPI is unrealistic compared
Correct.
to the ENR?
Correct.
Because I have always been taught locally is the better.
Not always. Not for
Not
for
when
every
it comes to
service.
construction numbers.
Correct. And utilities is heavy in construction.
Okay, finally, an answer. Okay. Is this fair to say that this rate increase is actually part of some of your construction projects? You know, they're all being tied into it and having the users and all of it being paid back,
Yes.
right? It pretty much looks at use, construction expansion, things that are in our comp plan, all those things that we have yet to say yes to, but it looks at it and it says, okay, how do we pay for this? And you span it out over the X amount of time, and then that's how you come up with your study. And I'm oversimplifying it, I understand, but I want to make sure that the populace understands how we got here. That it's fair to
It's
say that.
a comprehensive overview of the different elements that we kind of talked about.
And the things that you need to get there.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so with that said, how much do we have in our capital improvement account for the district? Don't we have a set aside fund balance similar to every other department / district that says these are specifically for capital improvement monies, right?
Yeah, you have a renewal and replacement fund balance, but you also have, I guess, also set aside funds for specifically where your capacity fees are put in, and those are spent only for growth-related projects. So yeah, you do have cash balances, and the cash balances, as we talked about, are a big part of the overall balancing act. So
what you're trying to say is that we have about 12 million or less in there that is part of the capital fund project. I'm trying to get a number here. And I don't think you're gonna have it. So I think it's a city internal number that I need, that I wanna know how much to date is unencumbered amount that's sitting in the fund balance that's specifically for utilities projects, which is called capital improvement project fund balance. Who the heck knows what it's called these days?
Yeah, in the report, we have a, I guess on one of the tables. Because it is a comprehensive report. If you look at, on page 1-52,
1-52,
yes,
so
it has,
we don't know what real number that is.
it's also table 1-14, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's what I need, because I can't, I got a 1-15, is that what you're saying?
1-52. It's also,
52?
yes, 1-52, and it's also table 1-14.
What global page there, city manager?
It's, the page number, section number down there is 1-52. The table is 1-14. Projection of fund cash balances and interest income is the name of the
Okay,
table.
so it's global 87. Okay.
So what this does is, for all the different utility funds, it shows the starting cash balance, then it shows the sources and uses and funds, and then it projects the ending cash balance for each year.
Okay, here it is, capital replacement, but you did this last year, correct?
Did what?
The study, these numbers are not accurate, bottom line, correct?
No, they are accurate.
Up to date?
Sure.
Today?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
the
find that
last formal study was done in 2015.
How do I get this through? The fund balance is forever being the capital improvement bucket, I'm gonna call it. The capital improvement bucket for the district is constantly being put money into it. So what is that balance today? Because it's not gonna be the same as what's in this study, considering when the study was put together. That's what I'm trying to find out.
But the study should.
Which is
I mean,
why I said
the
you
beginning
probably
numbers
don't
that
know
we-
this.
That we have also include the work in progress and the deposits. So we have estimated amounts for the current year, which should include all your work in progress.
You got a dollar number you can give her? That's what she's
Encumbered and
looking for.
unencumbered,
I
is
mean,
that what
that
you're
is,
saying?
that is what we have in here.
You got a dollar
is-
number? She's looking for a specific dollar number.
Okay.
So for the water capacity fee,
Water capacity, okay. In the operating fund, we had $21.7 million of unrestricted cash.
There you go.
In the renewal and replacement fund, that's set aside for your, that's kind of set aside because of your bond ordinance requirements, you got $1.3 million. You have about $97,000 in customer deposits. And that's, you had $7.9 million in your water capacity fee fund.
But a sinking fund.
Sinking fund, I don't have that balance. And
What
then we
was the
had
water capacity? I'm sorry, I missed it, going a little fast.
Said the water capacity was 7.8 million, 7.9 million.
Is that on this sheet? Because I don't see that.
That's on page 1-54, which is also table 1-14. On 1-54, line 94, you see the $7.9 million in the water capacity fee fund.
Now, that water capacity fee is supposed to pay for future infrastructure due to the capacity needs of what has paid into that, correct?
Yes.
And so the 7.9 at the end of 2029 will still have how much?
At the end of 2029, we're anticipated to actually have a balance of 8 million.
No, 2029.
Oh, 2029, we're, yeah, 76,531. So it's advisable to spend those in a timely manner.
So you plan on spending them down in the next?
Yeah,
10 years?
all the capacity fees, we want to, any use of restricted funds like capacity fees, that frees up unrestricted funds, and it's just appropriate to spend capacity fees in a timely manner.
Okay, I'm just gonna have one last thing. The pipe out there, I see you're actually going to be looking at those, reuse water, supplies. Remember the pipes going from the city to West Villages? At some point, they prevented us from hooking other water and sewer customers up to those pipes. Does that still exist? It is water and sewer, it's just water. And I think the lines were under the amount that we're actually gonna need them, so we might have to go back in and raise the size of them, because it had something to do with the size. And I am really stretching my memory here, so does anyone have any update on any of that?
Okay, so West Villages Improvement District did install water and wastewater lines up to the district from our existing system.
But we gave them impact fee credits, right?
We have not given, no, no ma'am.
Okay.
Not at all.
It was just part of their.
It was part of what
Back
we
when
were
you could
doing with
actually
them.
say you have to do this before you can build?
Correct.
Back in the day, yeah.
Yeah. And the plan, we did a US 41 corridor study way back in the late 2010 timeframe.
Something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And we did work it out with the pipelines are ours. The responsibility to provide them service is ours until their wastewater plant is constructed, and then we do not have a responsibility to provide them any future wastewater through that line. So that entire line can be used for any connections that the city chooses to want to allow to connect. And on the
But
water
not
side.
till our facility is built, correct?
And we've had a few along the way that we've needed to connect as well. But for instance, like the Mayak River Oyster Bar and the Senator
Right.
Bob Johnson's Landing. So we have worked all that out. There is no, they don't, we have it in our agreements, which I believe will someday come back to this board for approval. And there is absolutely no problem whatsoever with providing service to the entities along the 41
Corridor,
street
but
there.
once the facility's built.
There, like I said, we have connected already some wastewater folks. Operationally, we could maybe run into problems if we had tried to connect too many at one time, but I mean, they're getting real close on the wastewater side.
The answer is yes.
Yeah,
We can.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And the pipe is the correct size? Because I remember back in the day, we talked about it being too small at this point. At the time, it was a large size, but now it's possible that it's not the right size
Well,
now.
once you build that 2 million gallon a day sewer plant, you've
It'll
got
be fine,
a
right.
sewer plant, you got a sewer pipe that can handle 5,000 ERCs. So
Okay.
you've got more than,
Yep.
you've got capacity for days,
That makes sense now.
so to
Okay.
speak.
I'm done for now.
Commissioner Luke?
Didn't she have the light on first?
Yeah, but she's already questioned twice. I was just gonna go to you and then I'll come back.
Mine's gonna be relatively short, and I'm probably gonna be on the bandwagon before I ask, or soapbox, I should say. I understand this ENR that you're recommending, because the construction cost is outlandish at this point for infrastructure. Since being in this office, I have watched the federal government and the state governments not doing what they need to do for local when it comes to infrastructure. We went to the National League of City, and we heard that this is basically an epidemic across the United States, that our infrastructure is not being taken care of and addressed. They keep cutting taxes, they keep cutting support, and they leave it upon the locale people to make up the difference. I'm very proud of what our city does to try to keep up with the infrastructure, but we continually have to increase and do these types of things because they are cutting the support to us. So my question, wouldn't it ease the local burden if the federal and the state would address infrastructure as they should be doing?
It certainly would, and you hit the nail on the head. The American Society of Civil Engineers regularly publishes a report card on America's infrastructure, and Florida's infrastructure is rated a D. So yes, it would be great, and a lot of times local governments are presented with unfunded mandates that, like, you have to do something and you have to figure out how to fund it. So yes, absolutely, it would certainly be would be wonderful if Big Brother stepped in and helped fund some of these.
Well, that's why we pay the taxes to Big Brother, but he doesn't take care of us the way we need to. And it puts us in a pickle up here because we want to do right by our infrastructure. We want to do right by the services to our citizens. We want to keep the rate just as low as possible, but when Big Brother doesn't do his part, it becomes very hard. You have to make those tough decisions. Thank you for your report.
Sure. Vice Mayor?
I just have a follow-up question. Going back to page 10
Of the
of the PowerPoint.
okay.
Page 10, it says water and wastewater capacity fees. What can those capacity fees be used for?
Growth-related projects or growth-related debt service.
Okay, so if, I know at some point we're gonna have to put a water plant and stuff out east. This capacity fees would help build that plant, correct? Okay. If we have to increase a pipe size, let's say it's, I don't know what the numbers are, we'll say 10 and we need to make it 15. Would capacity fees be able to pay for that?
They could pay for a portion.
A portion of that, okay.
Portion of it.
So-
The portion that's related to the upgrade that you're basically doing to serve growth.
Okay, so why in the blazes, with the cost of construction, why would we want to reduce the capacity fees, which is reducing impact fees for the utility department? And I know that it says here it's because the efficiencies for level of service. It has nothing to do with building new construction plants or new facilities or new piping or anything. Why would we reduce these costs, these fees?
The capacity fees are calculated based on your costs divided by the number of equivalent residential units you can serve from that capacity. So if each unit is allocated a lower amount of gallons, then you can serve more units with that same amount of capacity. So the cost per unit of capacity is lower. If you I mean, I understand that, you know, it's not good to, you know, that, I mean, you have to be, the advantage of having lower, what we're basically doing by lowering the levels of services, we're saying that our capacity can now serve a higher number of equivalent units. So the cost per unit is lower. If you have
You can reduce your legal challenges by being more accurate about what you're actually servicing and how much it's actually costing you. So if you start charging outlandish connection charges, you can get legally challenged, and that could end up in you paying back millions of dollars. That's one reason, but I mean.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jason, is that you want to try and right size your levels
Be
of
as accurate
service
as
and
possible.
have your capacity fees. You want to be reasonable in how much capacity allocation you assign to a residential unit, and just based on the you know, the current flow and the current usage per customer, it just makes sense right now to lower the level of service standards.
To be as accurate as possible, because you don't want to have a developer come in here and challenge and say, you know, the average use is, you know, 155 gallons. Why are you charging me as if each unit's going to be 210 gallons?
But the people living in homes, I think they average 2.3 people, which is probably right, but there's a lot of homes that have multi-generationals that are now starting to live in them. Instead of 2.3 people,
Right.
you're seeing 4 and 8 people living in a home. You're seeing vacation rentals that are renting out a room, 2 people to a room, so there's 6.
Right. But the actual data is showing the usage is dropping. Regardless of all that, all those things you're talking about, the actual data is showing that the usage is dropping.
Okay, so thank you for that. We'll just move on. The ENR. I'm sorry, did Mr. Newkirk want to add something?
No,
He
actually,
looked like he was very
I was
low.
just gonna try to make this a little bit simple. By lowering that gains us more capacity at the plant, which now will enable us to sell more capacity. So we'll be able to sell more. So that price that's being lowered, because we have extra now to sell, it'll work itself out. So,
All right,
and back to the other one, low-flow toilets, low-flow water fixtures. Every study that we've done shows that they are nowhere near using that amount of water. So we're just being absolutely fair.
okay. Appreciate that rebuttal and explanation, Mr. Newkirk. The ENR, that is the cost of construction, correct? The national average cost of construction for these plants, correct?
Yes, for
Okay.
a bunch of nationwide construction cost trends.
So why would we use ENR for rates for the use? Everything's already been constructed. So why would we be using ENR to determine rates?
Well, the rates include the costs, are funding the multi-year capital, are helping to fund the multi-year capital program that includes, a primary driver for the need for rate adjustments is often the capital program.
CIP.
That's typical, that's the
So
capital
that
program.
goes back to the capacity fees that you are just now reducing.
Yeah, but not everything in your CIP is growth related. You've got a lot of replacement. I mean, we're replacing millions of dollars with the pipes that are at their end of their
Okay.
age. I mean,
So the things that aren't capacity
yeah,
related, they're.
you can't use your
okay.
connection. You can't
Gotcha.
use your capacity charge to pay for those.
All right, so when are we going to hold, or if are we going to hold a community meeting about these new rate increases?
We'll be sending out notices of when it's coming back to y'all,
Okay,
and people will be invited. They'll be notified of when it's going to come.
that's what
before
I'm
you.
looking for, is the process on customer notification of these rate increases. So if you could fill me in on that.
So if we get permission today to move forward, we were planning on starting to send out the residential notice, or the customer notices beginning tomorrow, so.
And when would these take effect?
It would be for October 1st, and so we would do with the 2 readings that the miscellaneous fee ordinance is going on.
I'm
I
sorry.
believe- Oh, I'm sorry. It would be effective October 1st, but it would be for the readings, I believe, are July, second reading in July, and the first reading in September are the dates that the miscellaneous fee ordinance is coming back. We'd like to bring it back at the same time.
So these notices, is it separate from their invoice? Or is it like a little square on the bottom of the invoice?
A lot of times it's I'm not sure
It
what
was
the.
on the backup where it says, Parks and Recs having X, it's probably
Okay.
the same thing,
Ours is
right?
an actual stuffer. We put it in with the bill,
Hmm.
and we notify our email customers as well. But it's a full page document that we send out.
Thank you. And those notices, you said will go out as soon as possible then? Okay, thank you for that. I'm glad we got that added too. I appreciate it.
Can we wrap up our questioning? I
I'm
got
done.
one more. Okay, Commissioner Carrison?
Yeah, going back to the 1-47, actually, I guess it would be 48. Nope, just kidding. 49, table 1-13, talking about the capital improvement program, and it looks like, and these are all the funding sources, which are the little buckets of savings accounts. We have the capital improvement program, which you're saying is only has 662,000 in it. Is that accurate number?
161 million, you're
see.
talking about 1 dash.
None of these are making sense to me. I'm talking about 1-13, and that's the estimated multi-year capital improvement program and funding source. That's the revenue. You're saying that we're only going to get 662,000 and change in revenue this year.
On 1 dash, can you, which line number?
1-49
1 dash 49, okay.
is the page,
What's the line number? It's out to the left.
line 5. It says revenue, water system capital improvement program.
That's just a
662.
a funding source abbreviation. If you go to page 1-51, it shows estimated funding sources for the entire capital improvement program, and that includes coming directly. That includes funding from rates, funding from operating reserves, funding from capacity fees. So it shows you, just the estimated funding source. It also, as we talked about, a lot of the funding is from the infrastructure surtax and also developer contributions. It shows an estimated funding source for all $161 million of the capital program from 2019 through 2029.
All right, let me try it a different way. If you look at table 1-13.
Okay.
And you have total water system capital improvement program, which is on line 60. You still have a balance of 3 million plus there, correct?
That's the total amount of expenditures that are projected for 2019 for the water program.
And then you go up to, in 21, over 27 million.
Yes.
What is it that we plan on doing in 21, or 20 to 21, that's gonna cost over half of what we've spent? Is it an expansion in water sewer that we haven't discussed yet? Is it an additional,
I just happened to find it quicker.
I have no idea.
That includes the developer contribution of the water plant in 2021 of 24.15 million.
So that's not real money.
No, ma'am. That's why,
Okay.
if you look at the last page where Brian was originally
Do
pointing
you
you
have
to,
any idea how hard it is to flip pages on this computer?
I know, I'm so sorry, it's page 86, but it does show that is a
Seriously?
developer contributed capital project.
All right, so when you say that there'll be a balance of 27 million, because as I understand that this is the revenue taking out the expenses, and then that's what your balance is, no?
No. This whole table is just capital projects. So it doesn't, it tells you where the money's coming from, but there's nothing about balances on here at all. It's just the money that it's gonna cost to do the project. So the total is $161 million capital improvement program for the through 2029.
Okay, because I thought you were utilizing the whole table where it talks about the revenue side. So you're saying that's just the expenditure side?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense now. Thank you. Same with the wastewater capital improvement, correct? And we're going from 1.5 million that we're gonna spend this year, and really kind of staying fairly level throughout all the years. I guess my question is, why is it, other than the water facility that is being supposedly given to us, which really isn't, they're getting impact fee credits, so essentially it's not being given to us. But my question is why are we not spending more money on the wastewater capital improvement side, really kind of looking at that, since that's the thing that seems to be the biggest bone of contention statewide, and that expansion. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jen?
I believe I do. I think what you're referring to is maybe the sewer expansion project program to replace septic tanks and things of that nature. For the capacity part, for the portion of the plant that you would need to serve those customers, and the main transmission, the larger transmission, you would be able to use capacity fees for that, but not for actually the collection system and anything like local. You would not be able to use capacity fees for that. So we could not really include that in the calculation for wastewater capacity fees.
It says wastewater system capital improvement program, period. It has nothing about capacity, nothing. You get what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, there is a.
Unless this is just based on our comp plan and our long-term plans, then we just haven't allocated anything to expand the wastewater, maybe.
Right, I mean, commission, and you know, when we discuss again the how to, you know, start the conversion process for water and sewer, we can just, you know, we can determine if you wanted to add some funding to that, but it's a difficult sell to me, because you're using existing ratepayer funds to connect new customers. So to me, that's a little bit of a tough sell to existing customers. That would be like.
Well, they're existing customers who have they don't have city service. I mean, they're existing residents, let's put it that way, that have septic, no? Explain, someone, please.
Well, currently, our plan, what's in the CIP and everything right now is to expand water and sewer with surtax money.
Okay, take the water out.
Okay, that's fine.
Worry about the sewer.
Okay, so it would be to pay for that construction, we would pay for that out of our surtax funding.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, entertain a motion.
Move to direct staff to prepare and submit proposed user rate, level of service, and miscellaneous fee adjustment recommendations for fiscal year 1920, then 2021, and 21-22.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by the Vice Mayor. Commissioner Luke, you have anything?
No, sir.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I appreciate the study and all of the question and answer and stuff here. This is going to come back for another reading and hearing, and at that time, I would really like to see a comparison of CPI starting for that 2022 year before we formally adopt going to ENR. I'd like to see what that comparison is using a CPI and the ENR, so that we can really make a good educated decision using the past maybe 10 years as a comparison to kind of get the trend and a graph or something.
Sure.
I'll let y'all figure that out, but I don't know if you need that as a consensus, Assistant City Manager, or do you want it in the motion?
No, we got it. We'll get it.
Okay, so that was the only other thing, and I appreciate you letting the citizens know right away. And are you going to be informing them too of the meeting dates, the commission meeting dates? Okay.
Part of the requirement.
Part of the requirement, thank you. I appreciate that, and look forward to that discussion about that ROI on budget talks. Thank you.
All right, I have nobody else, so let's take the vote.
Oh, did you want something?
Did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just gonna say that I'm not going to support this. One, we're pricing people out of the city. Two, I think that there is enough revenue, enough capital, enough fund balance in here to do what we need to do for the next 5 years. Three, I think there's no allocation for other things in this study, like possible grants like we just received. There's other revenue sources that are not being accounted for. And the capacity / impact fees / capital improvement fund, to me, they're all the same. And I think we also need to get a better grip on where we see ourselves in this particular district for the next 10 years before we determine this is what we're gonna do. Because here's my concern. We're gonna find ourselves in a problem in 5 years where we're gonna have to expand water, sewer, whatever it may be. And we have not planned for that. And that $2 fee is then gonna go up to a whole lot more money. And I think we're kind of like doing like a cart before the horse type of deal, where unless we get a better grip on where we plan on going with the department as a whole, this is kind of good, but my fear is within a year to 2 years, you're gonna say it's just not enough, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, so.
All right, let's take the vote. That passes 4-1 with Commissioner Carasone dissenting for reasons stated on it.
Can I get a copy of this in actual print form before?
Y'all, anyone else besides her want print?
I can't do it, I'm
Just
sorry,
one?
I'm blind.
Just one.
Okay,
Blind as a bat.
we'll move on to our public hearings. We have our ordinances for second reading. Ordinance number 2018-33. Clerk, please read ordinance by title only.
The City of Northport,
Please
Florida.
turn on your mic.
It's on.
Oh. Didn't sound like it.
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the Code of the City of Northport, Florida, Chapter 58, Planning and Development, Article 3, Impact Fees, allowing for deferral of payment of impact fees, modifying the timeline for and interest paid on refunds, and removing outdated language, amending Appendix A, City Fee Structure to provide fees for petitions related to impact fees, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna defer to the city attorney if
You want to defer to Emmerich?
I'm just going to defer the commission for questions at this point.
There you go. Vice Mayor.
So in this second reading, I know from the first reading, we had quite a discussion about possibly putting a cap, a maximum amount of deferred impact fees, and also we wanted some kind of evaluation before we would consider impact fees. So I'm looking forward to that conversation after the question part, because I don't think I can ask a question about that since that's a board's decision, correct? There's my question.
Yes, ma'am, that is a policy decision, and as a 30-second summary, the board had given direction to bring this ordinance back with some parameters in it, but didn't define the parameters. So what's presented here is for your discussion. What I found in looking around the state with respect to deferred impact fees is that most entities are not doing they're not deferring impact fees. Where you see waivers and reductions most commonly is with respect to a program for affordable housing, which I didn't present here because I think that's a bigger topic that probably will be coming before the commission soon. So what you see here with respect to parameters are new commercial development with a building permit valuation of $1 million or more. Changes also include that an agreement is now required that will set forth the payback restrictions or payback schedule, not to exceed full payment within 3 years.
Some of the questions, again, I have are more policy-driven as far as the wording in here, no later than 3 years, and I like language that is very definitive, says shall be repaid in 3 years, so those are something to think about on line 109.
To that end, that is a policy decision, but this allows you to enter an agreement saying it has to be paid in 1 year.
Right.
It has to be paid in 2 years, but it gives you a max.
Also allows them to pay early if they even get the 3 years.
And then I asked the question about a service charge, and maybe city attorney, you can help me with this. When the lien, if a deferral is granted, there would be a service charge and fees associated with a lien having to be filed. And I liked your answer, but it said something in the answer. It said that it should, the service charge and those fees should be in the fee schedule, and I did not see that in that schedule.
So the term service charge has been removed because it's not consistent with the other areas, the remainder of the code. So there's nothing in here that's called a service charge. Instead, what you'll see put in the fee schedule is a fee to file a petition for a deferral of impact fees at a fee of $300. Of course, these fees are also at your discretion. And looking toward that for the fee schedule, we realized, oh, there are no fees to request a waiver or reduction, which is already in the code. So we inserted those as well. The code further refers to a petition for a refund of impact fees. So we identified that as a fee of 0, but at least it's identified so there's no question of, for clarity purposes when someone comes to institute that process. So what you see here in the fee schedule is what was referred to in the first reading draft as a service charge. It's a fee for filing the petition. These amounts that are here for your discussion came from talking to Neighborhood Development Services, who gathered information from the planning and the building divisions, and considering legal time as well. So that's the service charge portion of your question. With respect to the cost for filing liens, in the subsection that begins at line 111, it states that the lien will include all amounts for the impact fee liability plus interest, penalties, costs, and fees for collection. Those costs include but are not limited to recording fees for a lien and a release of lien. Those are the two instruments that you file. You file the lien to secure your interest. You file a release of lien, sometimes called a payment of notice, to put on the record that the lien's no longer effective. The county clerk has recording fee charges for both of those, and those are included there in the costs, according to the commission's direction at the first reading.
So the costs to record the lien, release the lien, recording fees, all those fees and staff time is part of that $300?
No, ma'am.
That's addition.
The $300 is the fee to file the petition. The ultimate liability of someone whose impact fees will be deferred will be the impact fees themselves, what's deferred, any interest, penalty, costs, fees for collection, and then the cost of recording the lien and releasing the lien.
So that gets...
those costs are not, those recording costs are not set by the city. Those are set by the county clerk, and it's dependent upon whatever, first of all, her current fees are at the time, and secondly, the length of the document.
So if we had to file a lien, those costs that would be incurred with filing the lien would be tacked onto the amount of the lien?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see here. So we also talked about collecting if, let's say, a developer or builder goes bankrupt. in the order of lien collection. And from your memo, it sounds like that if there's a mortgage on the property, that gets paid first, and anything left over gets allocated accordingly. But this kind of lien would depend on who filed other liens first.
Yes, ma'am, there's a phrase that we commonly use, first in time, first in right. So, you know, whoever's on file first based on date and even the time.
So it is possible we could lose these deferred impact fees if the builder went bankrupt or decided not to pay, even though there's a lien on the property.
It's a possibility. I mean, you are looking at very large commercial projects. You know, so hopefully there would be enough there. There would be something left to collect against. It is a possibility. Another protection from that is written into the second reading is the agreement. So now we have an agreement which would also give the city a potential cause of action for breach of contract. Now, again, entities can go bankrupt or they can be insolvent. So, you know, I always say that a judgment is only as good as the paper it's written on, depending on who it's against. You can have a judgment for $6 million, and if the entity is bankrupt or insolvent, you have a very expensive piece of paper. So those are potential risks.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions, but I definitely look forward to the conversation about value and maximum amount.
Commissioner Luke?
I only have one question. When it says petition on the chart, it's referring to them requesting of us to do this. What if in a scenario we're trying to get affordable housing and we offer somebody to waive the impact fee? They're not soliciting, but we're actually offering it. What happens in that case?
So, you know, I'm hoping that if the commission is interested in doing something with impact fees for affordable housing, that you would be interested in going in and amending the code to provide the process and the criteria for that. Unless and until that happens, that would need to, regardless of whose, you know, idea it is, it would need to go through the process. And so, you know, currently there's a fee schedule for that.
So if we offered it to somebody, they'd still have to pay $100.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have nobody else. Entertain a motion.
I'm ready. Move to approve ordinance number 2018-33, and I should probably see that that's written correctly or read correctly.
Second.
Hold on, with the caveat to have the ordinance reflect that the deferment should be no more than 80% of the impact fee total. Addressing what Commissioner, so in other words, you can defer 80% of it, but 20% will have to be paid up front. I'm trying to find a way to make sure that we cover actual costs out the door. Or not up front, but by CO, I think is what the, do we have a second for at least conversation?
I'll second for
remove it.
I'll
I
second
may
for-
remove it, yeah.
No, I'll second for conversation because I
Okay.
think there's a process that is going to make that impossible to do with a 80%.
So I have a motion on the floor by
Wait,
Commissioner
wait.
Pierce. Yep.
I'm sorry, what do you mean? Because I was gonna get a consensus to get together and create the process for this impact fee deferment.
Okay, so we do have the motion on the floor and I seconded it, so we can have that conversation
Have discussion.
and have that discussion if that's okay, Mayor.
That's the point of me putting motion out
Right.
there.
So we have the motion on the floor by Commissioner Carestone, seconded by Vice Mayor. Commissioner Carestone?
I mean, I would assume that there's going to be a process. In fact, I was going to hope to put a second motion that we as a commission come back and actually delineate and develop the process for these deferments, maybe even requirements. I know that there's some things in there, but it might need to be more ironed out, like the city attorney said, the affordable housing. There may even be some other things that we're not thinking of, like to bring in certain types of economic development, and we may want to get our economic development manager to kind of weigh in on it. So I was hoping that at a later time, we can have that conversation with those that are involved, so we can maybe iron out a more finite process, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And then that entail kind of leads into that 80%. That'll give you 20% that has to come up before CO, right? CO, right? Yeah, I thought so.
So Commissioner, are you envisioning adopting this ordinance now and then revising the ordinance in the future?
We may have to create other ordinances specific to those types of deferment processes, like affordable housing, medical facilities.
I would suggest that this would be the place to do it in this.
Okay,
in
so
these
we would
code
have to amend
provisions.
this. All right,
Yes.
okay.
And the process as set forth here is that, an applicant files a petition, then it goes through and there's an agreement drafted and that comes forward for commission approval. And under the code is currently written for a deferral, it would not apply to affordable housing. It would only apply to these specific commercial projects with a building permit
Well, and
valuation
that's
of $1
another
million
thing,
plus.
what about, yeah, and so that would have to be amended in here, right?
It would, and I'd like to point out that if you look at the subsection just before this, it would now be numbered subsection D, the entire code provision related to a reduction or waiver of impact fees says the city commission may waive or reduce city impact fees only if the impact generating development serves a valid public purpose and the petition is submitted within 30 days of payment of the impact fee. So this subject matter is about deferral. That's what we've noticed. That's what you told us to bring back. And so we've tried to do something more thorough on deferral. But in your waiver and reduction section, you have no process or no standards whatsoever.
Thank you.
So, I would certainly suggest that would be ripe for future revision.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is that I think that we need to get that process. I think we need to get those priorities, because when I had support, I don't know if I brought this up or I just supported it, that because we had done this in the past, the deferment, the idea was that there were certain types of economic development that we wanted to come in specific areas, like for instance, health. We wanted to have medical along the Toledo Blade corridor. And we thought that a way to bring that economic development in was to do a deferment program. And so I was kind of thinking that this is similar to that, but all of that has not been hashed out, so that really needs to be brought back. And then, affordable housing is definitely a must. Again, those types of things need to be amended in here at a later date. Once we figure that
if you want to do
out,
something
right?
with respect to deferrals, the way this is advertised, you can do it today. If you don't have enough information to do it today, you can continue it and do it at another meeting.
No
Or
way.
you can adopt this in whatever form you
That's
want
my
to.
idea, is to
and then bring
adopt
back for
this
2 readings.
and bring back
more information and-
well, first we need a workshop to determine what that information is, and then put it in an ordinance. But until those specific types of things are put in the ordinance, I feel like an 80-20, making sure that 20% is paid up front.
I have comments.
You get what I'm trying to say?
I'll wait till my comment.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
All right, I appreciate Commissioner Caruson's 80% in hearing that we need to collect something. The 80% though to collect.
No, collect 20. I'm
20%
sorry.
we
Yeah,
collect.
we collect
Okay,
20.
we collect 20%, 80% is deferred.
Right.
We have to approve it prior to CO through an agreement. But that amount is basically estimated because the CO hasn't been issued. So I think maybe staff is gonna have to help us on this one. So if we're going to have them pay 20% of the impact fee, and then they're going to reach an agreement on the other 80%, this is all done before the calculation of the impact fees 30 days prior to the CO. It's not done afterwards, it's done before.
Yeah, yeah, no. I
So
get
it's
that,
based on an
right.
estimate, I was looking more for maybe a dollar amount, because I don't know if you guys saw the email that came out showing the value of some of the businesses and how much impact fees were collected.
Yeah, but weren't they different timelines? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some subtles, and their impacts are different too. Like Culver's is a much more intense traffic impact.
Patient. But Culver's wouldn't qualify because it's got a value less than $1 million anyways. Dollar General qualified, but their impact fees are so minor. Their impact fees are under $10,000. So I was looking more for, if your impact fees are over $50,000, then we can talk to you about deferment.
You want to use a different criteria.
Yeah, instead of the percentage, because, like a neighborhood Walmart would definitely qualify because it's a higher value and they paid higher impact fees. The hotel, which prompted this whole conversation, has a value of $9.5 million and they collect over $100,000 in impact fees.
But it goes by the impact that that particular business places on whatever it is. So that's why I said we need a deeper conversation, because if we want more hospital or more medical or more web-based types of businesses so that it's less impact, then we should do something for those to bring those in. 'Cause, you know
I'm
what I
still
mean?
waiting.
You get what I'm trying to say?
I would like to see line 99 where it says the value amount is more than $1 million, because we have these conversations, we want it to be a rarity, not a common. We don't want to be deferring impact fees regularly and at least monthly with each development. I'd like to see a larger value, and maybe instead of 80%, say 70% can be deferred, or even 50%, because this is also, we have to consider, if they don't pay, if they go bankrupt, and we have a responsibility to keep up the level of service and be able to build and do things. And I know it's 3 years, I love the 3 years, I think that's great. So those are my comments, I'll let somebody else, and then maybe we can hash some differences out through amendments.
I have, was there something you wanted to address?
Frank has got an excellent suggestion. I'm going to have Carrie fill in for me for just 2 shakes. And Frank, if you could speak.
Is it really this volatile, this whole topic? That you're getting
Yeah,
out
he
front?
can't stand to be in the same place as us, right?
I go ahead and speak. I've been waiting before staff does, so that he hears my viewpoint
yeah.
too, because my viewpoint is different. I don't want to be tying our hands in the future by coming in and setting up all of these parameters. That hotel came in and would not have come had we not deferred those. Not that they needed that 147,000, but because we showed them we want you. So by doing this, we are not tying our hands stating, oh, we can only give you 80% deferment. In the future, we may want, leave it broad enough that you are flexible. Every one of these has to come to you. You have to make that deliberation in that contract with them on a case-by-case area, or, case-by-case project. So I don't think we need to buttonhole this as to what we're gonna do in the future for something that we don't even see. So if affordable housing comes, we can tackle it because it's broad enough. If we want to only say, you know, we're only gonna defer 80% of that for you. We have the right to do so. But if we've got somebody like this hotel, what if we had said, we're only gonna defer 80% of yours? They would have felt as though that we weren't really wanting them because we didn't do the 100%. So I would rather have the flexibility to have it broad enough that case by case, we can make a decision at that point in time and not buttonhole ourselves. Thank you.
Miles?
Yeah, Frank Miles, Neighborhood Development Services Director.
Stand a little closer to the mic, sorry.
What Commissioner Luke has mentioned is, what I would suggest is, let this proceed. This is kind of the first one out of the gate. It's a hotel. You've all here, I've always wanted a hotel. And as Commissioner Carasone said, there may be other larger conversations about other targeted industries and businesses that you all would like to see come here, whether it be medical or knowledge-based or some other business or industry sector that you would like to see that you can incentivize to have them come. I think is certainly something that should be pursued. Most other communities have those kinds of arrangements, whether it be through impact fee incentivization or extension of utilities or some other mechanisms that might be made available.
Thank you. Commissioner McDowell?
So, City Attorney, I heard what Commissioner Luke said, and I agree with what she's saying, but I also understand we have a responsibility to make sure we're collecting the money for the impact, instead of having it being on the backs of the citizens. And I agree that certain businesses may get better deferral terms. I don't know what else to call it. Can we pick and choose a hotel over a car wash, or a hospital over a mattress store? I mean, can we do that legally?
Yes, ma'am. So first of all, the language in the ordinance does give you broad discretion. With respect to how you apply the ordinance, you need to apply it in an equitable manner. Now, yes, could you prioritize certain economic development projects over others? Yes. If you had two hotels come before you in the same economic conditions and you couldn't find any distinguishing factors between the two of them and you treated them differently, that could be a potential issue. But here, when you're talking about economic factors, they're often going to be elastic, right? What's the economic factors for today are not the same as a year from now, or it might be a larger hotel, or the impact fees might be a greater amount. I mean, so with all of these factors, you will have a lot of discretion. But if you're giving deferrals to all, and then you pick out one not to give it to, and there's no discernible reason for that change, then you could possibly be in trouble under equal protection as you're applying the ordinance.
And I appreciate Commissioner Luke for your point. As I always go back to trying to make sure that we're collecting what is required and due us, instead of losing money because we're trying to be wise in attracting economic development.
Well, as a reminder, a deferral is not a discount. A deferral is just delaying the payment. So unless there's some issue with collecting.
Right, that's where I run into the problem, and that's why I was looking for some kind of mechanism to collect something up front.
And as another reminder, just because someone applies doesn't mean that you have to grant a deferral at all.
Right.
You can always say no.
Just really quick, City Manager?
Yes.
Have your line?
Our economic development manager is available, and she also has a lot of experience with this kind of thing. She's got 2 cents she'd like to add.
Appreciate that.
Add 3.
Hello. Now, for the record, Mel Thomas. I'm Manager of Economic Development. So let's just talk just broadly speaking. When we look at impacts, we want to always look at what kind of jobs are coming to us. So the standard is typically more than 10 jobs, and it's looked at with at least 115% above the average wage in the community. So those are sort of standard based. That's across the board. It's very much a regional and a state standard that we know here and we're familiar with, and everybody kind of says, yeah, that's the norm.
So I would definitely be looking at what are the industries that are bringing in those higher paying qualifying jobs in targeted industries that the state and the county approve ahead of time. So that gets you in standard. There are no exceptions. That's exactly, if they meet those criteria, it's built into targeted industries, which Frank alluded to earlier, those kinds of things. Those are already preset. They're predetermined. It doesn't have to come before you in that regard. So it's just that's it. That's the, if you choose to kind of get on board with that standard, it's an easy mechanism to adopt. Does that help at all?
Mr. Carson?
Does, but it doesn't.
Okay.
I get that the state has standards.
Right.
I get that the nation has standards. But sometimes their economic development drivers do not work within our local standards. So what we did in the past, which apparently has been completely taken out, was that we created zones where we wanted to see certain types of development in, and we never got to that second portion where we could defer or reduce both impact fees, permitting, and so on and so forth, in order to enhance those particular types of economic development within those areas. Does that make sense?
It does.
I would love for us to get back there, but we can't do that with this right here, because while it's broad, one thing I have learned is that discretion equals litigation. That if we want to utilize this in certain measures, then we need to spell out what those measures are. And those measures can be broad, don't get me wrong, but we need to figure out why we're doing this, and then how do we do that? And that's why I was suggesting the workshop. Thank you for saying that. And trying to make those determinations, but passing this now, don't get me wrong, and then I would do another consensus or motion to have it brought up in the future of a workshop, along with economic development advisory board, maybe even the chambers weigh in. And I personally think that if you're gonna talk about affordable housing, deferment is not gonna cut it. It needs to be a reduction, okay? Because deferment is not gonna help affordable housing in any way, shape, or form.
That is where you see it with other entities, is with the
Right.
reduction.
And the 80-20, just real quickly, we did not take 100% of the Hampton Inn, correct? There was a percentage or an amount of money in impact fees that they paid, and then there was a balance that they deferred. Is that not correct?
The hotel that came before the commission requesting a deferral was not granted a deferral because your code didn't give you a
Correct.
mechanism to do that.
Correct.
And
Okay,
that-
so it
and
wasn't
instead,
even granted.
Instead, you directed staff to come back with an ordinance to allow you to defer a future request.
Okay, so it wasn't even deferred. It was just that they wanted the deferral, we couldn't do the deferral, therefore, and they still built.
They haven't built yet.
Yeah.
But the
I just
impact
wanted to
would be
make sure.
done at CO, correct? So no payment is made, and we do have the right to defer it then before they complete, correct? With this ordinance?
Hampton Inn hasn't even broke ground yet, Commissioner.
Oh, you're right.
They do have their project trailer up there.
No, yeah, I'm
Close.
Sure, I mean,
thinking we had to cut
But
everything
different
cutting, but it was
city
a
somewhere?
different- No, yeah, I am, apparently, poor Charlotte.
Yeah, we
Okay,
haven't
that
even
makes
broke-
sense, so
yeah,
they can come
nothing's done.
back after the fact, that makes sense.
Commissioner Luke?
Hang tight, Ms. Mel, please. Again, the broadness
Hey, you
of
came up here.
public purpose is broad. And I need to know and understand, because having discretion, when you have that broad statement of public purpose, pretty much protects you, because then you're able to state how you feel that public purpose is beneficial to you at that point in time. So I personally see the things that Commissioner Carazone is talking about is possibly being part of the Economic Development Master Plan that is being worked on right now, that we have these targeted industries, that we talk about those types of things, enhancements that we can do, have in our bucket to try to have people come. And then we utilize this ordinance in order to implement either the waiving or the deferral of said impact fees. I don't think we need to be putting all of the enhancements that we can do in this ordinance. This ordinance is strictly for doing what we're doing right now. And I think what that workshop that is being talked about is part of what should be within the Economic Development Master Plan. Thank you.
If I may,
Oh, wait, go ahead, Ms. Mel, go ahead.
if I may, I think workshop's a brilliant idea, whoever came up with that. Congratulations. I think there's so many new best practices out there you have yet to discover and that other cities have done very well. I think if you took a look at some of those kind of creative notions, the creativity on this side of the shop is really pretty big these days. So to do that and to be able to discuss that in a format that you're not looking at a particular project, but rather you're looking at the overall well-being and the growth of the city. And that gives you that vision piece that, you know, outward 20 years from now, what's it going to look like? How's the impact of that going to be on us 20 years from now? And it also allows you to think in terms of shifting that burden from a neighborhood, from the individual to the appropriate business. Are you really trying to sort of keep certain businesses at bay because they're not exactly how you want your city to become?
Or
You
that
know,
we have one on every corner.
Exactly. So there are ways, you know, to, without screaming, we don't want you here, there are ways to sort of push back and say, this is not exactly where we're headed. And it allows you that freedom, I think, to grow with the times and grow with the city. So from that perspective, I really strongly encourage you to do a workshop around this subject.
City Attorney?
I just wanted to clarify something that was said with respect to public purpose. Determining that there's a public purpose does not shield the city from legal liability. Pretty much everything that you do, you determine there's a public purpose. If you look in your ordinances, you'll see that there's a finding that it's for the general welfare, safety, and health of the public. That's generally a finding of public purpose. There could still be potential liability depending on how an ordinance is applied and other potential issues. I'm not saying that necessarily will occur here. I just wanted to make sure to clarify that.
Yeah, we gotta remember, we may be long gone, remember?
To clarify also, because I was the one that made that statement, I wasn't meaning that just that words protect us in that, but those words, we would be able to then look at the master plan of the economic development and state that, yes, we have written within our master plan that this is public purpose. And so thusly, we are fulfilling. That's what I was trying to get to. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, getting back to the motion, and I look forward to the conversation after this about the workshop, because I got a couple things I want to add to it. The 80% deferred, I like that amount, and 20%. To me, that 20%, to put it in layman's terms, is their buy-in. And I like that, so thank you for that. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor.
Can I amend the motion?
Yep.
That 20%, I don't know if we can do that though, legally. I was gonna say no take-backs.
No refunds.
Yeah, no refunds, but you can't do it because it's
If
an
you don't use
impact
it, you have to
fee,
get it
yeah.
back.
Okay, forget it, just kidding.
Okay, so we have
Sorry.
a motion on
Yeah,
the floor.
because it's
City
got to
Clerk,
be
would
paid
you
at
please?
CO.
Yeah.
That 20% would
That's
have to
true,
be
yeah.
paid at CO. Do we need to
Well,
put
they
that in the
can-
motion?
No, because that's the code, but they can pay in advance, so.
And I'll remind you that when this hotel does come back, you are now telling them that they have to pay the 20% of that impact fee that we talked about
But we may not,
waiving for them.
if this doesn't pass, they'd have to pay 100%, Commissioner.
Correct, if the whole thing doesn't pass, right, but another motion can be made to change it from the 80% to 100 and allow it to be broader. Right now, you're buttonholing it. You're not giving the future any more time to do anything different than what you're stating right now. And I don't like buttonholing anything,
But-
blocks you.
Each development, they know they have to pay impact fees at some point. I think the 20% is their buy-in. Yes, we will pay this 20%, knowing that 80% I will be able to pay over 3 years.
And you have the discretion to tell them every time that you want to do that, but it doesn't leave you the availability to do 100% if you so wish. You can tell them 80% all the time if you wanted to, but if you came across that 1 out of 5 that you wanted to do 100, you couldn't do it.
But that is the point of that workshop.
That's exactly where
which is the next motion.
yeah.
Well, I'm not going to vote to buttonhole something before you have a workshop on it. If you let this go through as it needs to go through and then have a workshop, fine.
So-
But to buttonhole it right now, no way.
Can I ask City Attorney a question? In the agreement that has to come back, can we say, we already gave the parameters that it has to be a value of $1 million project, and they have to repay the deferred in 3 years. Can we add a term to the agreement that says, yes, we will defer 90%, but you have to pay 10% upfront? Or can we give them the option to defer 100% or 50%?
So as written, the agreement, you could obviously choose not to defer, you could defer any portion up to 100%. If you put an 80% cap in the ordinance, you can't change that cap by agreement.
Gotcha.
But in that agreement, you could defer anywhere between 0 and 80. It wouldn't have to be a flat 80.
I'll make a
Based on the
motion.
language of the motion.
But that doesn't mean that we can't amend this to have exemptions that if it meets X criteria, then it could meet 100% deferment with commission approval under these conditions.
You can always amend the code with 2 proper readings.
I'll make a motion to
Well,
amend.
we have a motions on the floor.
Can I
You
make
mean
an
you wanna
amendment?
make an amendment?
Let me hear the motion again, it's
Sure.
been so long. City Clerk, would you read the motion to us again?
To approve ordinance number 2018-33 with the stipulation that the ordinance reflects deferment of no more than 80% of the impact fee total.
Hey, was your mic on? Can you do it again, please? Because I barely
Yes.
heard that.
To approve ordinance 2018-33 with the stipulation that the ordinance reflects deferment of no more than 80% of the impact fee total.
All right, that's the motion. I have
Can I make an amendment, Mayor?
an amendment.
I'll make an amendment to strike as much as I want, a maximum collected up front. I'll make a motion to remove the 80% deferred because of the agreement. So the amendment is to remove the 80% criteria.
Right, so we have a motion for 80%, then you're gonna make an amendment to remove the 80%, which means that motion will no longer be valid.
Why don't you just pull your second?
It's going to be, the motion then will be to approve this ordinance as
Yeah,
presented.
you can't make an amendment that's
Yeah.
gonna disqualify the original motion, so you'd have to remove your
Pull
second.
your second.
I'll pull my second.
Thank you.
There we go. And then, now do I have a second on the original motion?
What?
Huh?
I was the seconder, I
Well,
pulled
yeah,
it.
yeah.
She has to pull her motion and start over.
Well, either pull it or start over, or I can look for a second motion and the whole thing dies for lack of a
Okay,
second.
I pulled my I understand now. I pulled
Do
my
I have a
second.
second on the motion? Okay, I have Mr. Emrich as the second. Mr. Emrich, you have anything to your second?
No, I agree, with what commissioners have said, and even with Commissioner McDowell, there's gotta be a little catch can to where we do have some significance in our purse, you know, and that's just the way I believe it.
All right, so I have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, can I ask
the
a question?
amendment.
That Commissioner McDowell had withdrew her second because she said that we have
The ability in the agreement.
the ability in the agreement, but how does that, because the only reason why I did that and my concern and making sure that we have definitive guidelines is the litigious nature. That's great, but if we have a Hampton Inn come in, we give them 100%, then we have a Holiday Inn that's next door and we don't give them that 100%. And there is nothing in here that says the guidelines are for 100% X, Y, and Z.
But all apples have to be, I mean, apples to apples, right? So, I mean, all things have to be equal.
In a perfect world,
The more process and the more criteria that you have, then the more uniformity you're going to have and the less, potential successful challenge you will have. So those two things do correlate.
Sure.
But how much of that you want is up to you.
Sure, but then again, you only have to be equal if all things are being equal, right? That's what you were saying before. So if Hampton Inn comes in and this is all of everything that they fulfill is in this little box, and a Holiday Inn comes over here and they fulfill everything but a quarter of that box, well then, not all things are being equal. So then we have that opportunity to look at this separately.
You do, and as you do that, you begin to establish a practice. Like, oh, okay, now we're going to look at what it was that 25%. Is it total size? Is it total valuation?
Right.
Is it location? So you begin to kind of establish
Criteria.
those criteria. If you want, criteria to be added, you can do that fairly broadly. You can say we're going to consider the following criteria: location, jobs, the types of things that the economic development manager was talking about.
All right.
Can I speak
Yes,
to that? Again, to me, it is limiting buttonholing. We can refer at any point in time to the master plan of economic development in order to form that criteria of what we feel is the public purpose. Nobody is ever going to be number one or the first again. The hotel, it's the first. It was something that the community wanted, begged for. That criteria is never going to be matched by a second hotel. But I don't think we need all of the nuts and bolts in this. I think it needs to be in another document, and we refer to that other document as we make those case-by-case decisions. Thank you.
and Commissioner, you have absolutely said what it is that I'm trying to get a point across to, is that you defer 100% to a hotel, but now you get someone who comes in and they have a pawn shop and they want 100%. How do you justify that a hotel is more important than a pawn shop?
In that master plan, you have targeted what
Oh,
you're
I
looking
get that.
for. You look at
That's what I was trying
zones.
to do, actually.
But to me, to put zones, targeted targeted industries and all that type of stuff, that economic type stuff, doesn't belong in this ordinance. It belongs in that workshop placed within the master plan, so that when we pick this up, we've got that other document that is far more thorough. But to me, you don't mix the two. You keep this as is and then address economic development within its portion.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, and just going back to when I wanted a buy-in, I know Commissioner Emmerich had seconded it. I agree that we still need a buy-in, but we can do that at the time of the agreement. So for that reason, I'm not going to be approving the motion because of the agreement giving us that buy-in opportunity. So, thank you.
Let's take the motion, or let's take the vote.
Oh, we don't have a motion.
Yeah, we do.
Do.
You have it, and then he seconded it.
Oh, sorry.
You didn't withdraw your motion.
No, yeah.
So we still have the original motion, just with a different second term.
No,
Jesus.
I'm not the seconder, just for the record.
Yes.
Okay.
Emmerich is.
I'm sorry.
And that motion fails, 2-3, with myself, Mayor Hanks, Vice Mayor McDowell, and Commissioner Luke dissenting.
Or is it 3-2? See, that always messed me up.
I know.
Mhm.
Yes.
I move to
Commissioner.
approve ordinance number 2018-33 as presented on second reading.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by the Vice Mayor. Commissioner Luke, anything to that?
I would just like to see somebody after we go through this to maybe request that workshop be developed so that we can, as we're developing a master plan for economic development, have these ideas and these criterias that we're thinking about be placed within that.
All right, got a motion on the floor?
Can I
Second.
just say that I'm going to support this only because I do believe in a deferment program, although I'm not happy with not having a cap on it. So, what do you call that? Deferring, approving out of,
Compromising.
no, it's actually something else.
Hogtied,
Yeah, hogtied.
hogtied.
All right, let's take the vote.
Can,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor.
sorry. I just wanted to say thank you for this, and I appreciate the conversation, especially about the maximums and the buy-in for the developer and stuff like that. And I think that'll be part of the conversation that'll be had when our first agreement comes to us, and another conversation at the workshop time, so.
All right.
Gotta think of how it was worded.
And that passes unanimously. Commission, I really would like to tackle this next one before a break.
I still have another one and I'm
Yeah.
taking a break, so y'all can tackle it on your own.
Go ahead.
Actually, there's two left, isn't there?
Yeah, but I was gonna tackle the second reading, since it shouldn't be too long, and we just
How much
did a
you
lot
want
of.
Anyways, I would like to move that we direct staff to set up a workshop to define criteria for the deferment of 100% of the impact fees, and to include the Economic Development Department, the Economic Development Board, the Chamber of Commerce, for their input during and prior to that workshop.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Garrison, seconded by Commissioner Luke.
Oh,
Did not hit the
Do
motion
you have
button.
anything to that, Commissioner Garrison,
I
Commissioner
think
Luke?
we've.
I am thankful that she included all of those because Mel will bring to the table a lot of things for us to listen to. We sat in the meeting, Mayor Hanks and I did, with the chamber, and there's great information. So it's a basket that will be given of tools, and we can choose that and have some ideas of where and what we want to do for the future.
Vice Mayor?
Just double checking on that motion, did it include the economic development study? We have a study going on, and I just want to make sure that that's part of the motion.
I said that it would include the department, the board, the chamber, and then from there, when we do our workshop, we can do as Commissioner Luke had suggested, and that is to include our, I don't know, criteria that we feel is important into the study, and they can iron it out during that time, because the study's gonna take way longer than getting this
Workshop?
deferment.
Are you sure about that?
The way studies have been going, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think I bet on that.
We're also talking about redoing the impact fee study and mobility fees. Maybe they will be able to help us also for the affordable housing, because that's part of the study, I would think too, is what kind of fees others have done or could do and what we could do as part of that impact fee study and mobility fee study.
Which are you talking about? We're talking about economic development master plan, correct, Commissioner Luke? Right? I don't know what study you're talking about.
So if you're talking about deferring housing, affordable housing impact fees, don't we want to have that be part of the impact fee study, to have them look at that as part of their study for doing impact fees about affordable housing?
Oh, we've already done the study for that.
No, we
That's the
haven't.
next.
Well, personally,
The
myself,
study has not been done. It's in the process of being done.
That scope has already been developed, it includes that.
Okay, the scope is already done, but the contract has not come back
Correct me
for.
if I'm wrong. Scope is done.
I didn't know that, but the study itself has not been
It
completed.
hasn't, but I think we just entered into something with the consultant.
But that is not a bad thing. I mean, you have a study going on that shows you the impact of stuff. And what we're talking about, the economic development, that is where you then divert from your impact fees that you talked about. So you don't place a criteria for affordable housing in that impact. Otherwise, you're stuck with it. You give this exception to it through economic development.
It's actually gonna flow better,
Yeah.
considering that fee study has not been accomplished. Now at least they'll get an idea of what it is we're looking for that can be incorporated into that fee study, so.
We issued a notice to proceed to our, we've issued a notice to proceed to our consultant. We could ask them if they could throw that in there.
I think it's something definitely to look at. I really think if we're going to be doing an impact fee study, we need to include a segment about affordable housing, because it is a unique, its own
I'll
animal.
need some consensus on that.
Yes. I mean, I'm okay with looking at
I'm
it
gonna
as
have
well.
to have explained to me why there's a separate criteria for affordable housing when you're looking at the impact of what a household has on your city, the infrastructure, the transportation and stuff. To me, I don't see why an impact of affordable housing is different than impact of any other housing. Now, I can see how you handle it differently later, but the impact of it, to me, is the impact is the impact. And so I don't see how you can have a separate line for, I mean, are you gonna have a separate line for storage facilities? You know, so
That's fair enough.
you see it being an impact, and then what you do about that impact for that industry is to be different.
Commissioner, we have a mobile home impact fee, we have a villa impact fee, we have a residential impact fee, and we have multifamily impact fee. So
All be affordable housing. And so if you stick affordable housing in there, you're buttonholing again. And you may have trailer, you may have all those other things that you named that are considered affordable housing. So to me, the affordable housing is the after fact.
okay, fair enough.
All right, I'm a yes anyways. I think it's worth looking into.
I'm a yes if they have a separate way of figuring it.
I-
Affordable housing has been such a hot topic. I'm sure
Well,
there's experts that have some kind of way to figure it. I don't know.
Can I
All
clarify?
we do is ask, because, I mean, they've
Yeah.
already started.
Yeah.
That mean they're gonna be able to accommodate.
Yes.
And I'd like to clarify that it's how they determine it's been done in the past and in other areas that they look at affordable housing, because I got news for you. Those RVs and those trailers may be considered part of the affordable housing initiative, and there may be other types of criteria, so I don't wanna, yes, I'm willing to look at it, but that's up to them.
I'm gonna be a no, Commissioner Luke.
Can I get what the consensus is that you're guessing and knowing too, just so she's sure?
Thing on?
Yeah, is your thing on?
It's on.
That was not good.
Okay, so the consensus is to have staff ask the consultant who's doing the impact fee study to include affordable housing, and I'm a yes.
I'm a no. We have a yes. Commissioner Emmerich?
I'm good with asking about it, yes.
I have no problem of asking. I don't like the positive that the motion has. I think requesting to get the information to see if it is a criteria that we should look at, I am fine with that, but saying it definitely that there has to be that line item added, I would have to say no. If there's flexibility to it, I would say yes. So if it's being left definitive that it has to have that line item, I will say no.
Just looking for their input.
Were you wanting that?
Passes, it's 3-2.
It's 3-2, all right. So,
Definitely adding.
so the consensus passes.
Okay.
All right, so we gotta go back to the motion on the
Yep.
workshop.
All right. So let's take, can you go ahead and restate the motion, please?
To direct staff to establish a workshop to define criteria for deferment of 100% impact fees, including the Economic Development Department, Economic Development Advisory Board, and the Chamber of Commerce for input prior to and during the workshop.
Okay, let's take a vote. That passes unanimously. Okay, so we are
I
going to
got
take
it,
a
all right.
30-minute break.
30?
Yeah, lunch break.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, for those that complain that my lunch breaks aren't near long enough. So you just had to pee? Does everybody want to? Oh, sorry. I forget we're on camera. So, all right, so let me get a quick consensus. Do we want to move on or take a lunch break? I would say to move on with a little
I would say a
restroom
little
break.
10-minute break.
I was gonna go
All right.
15, 10.
All right.
10, 15
All right,
minute break.
let's do a 15-minute break. and then we'll move
15-minute
back.
break, and then we'll come right back.
And I don't know if anybody's going to the bathroom or not, just for the record. I have no idea what's happening.
me now?
Tell me when.
Can you hear me?
You gotta adjourn the
But
meeting.
let me just restart the meeting,
Okay.
because I don't think we were on record. Okay, now we're back. And we're going to get this started here at Public Hearing 7B, ordinance number 2019-06. City Clerk, please read ordinance by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the code of the City of Northport, Florida, Chapter 58, Planning and Development, Article 3, Impact Fees, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. City Manager?
Yes, sir. This is the second reading of your impact fee ordinance, basically allowing you to go up to 75% of the fee range recommended in the impact fee studies.
Okay, do I have any questioners for this?
Ready to make a motion?
Okay,
if you're
I'm ready to take a motion.
Move to approve ordinance number 2019-06 as presented on second reading.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Carrasone, seconded by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Vice Mayor. Commissioner Luke?
No, I think this will be very good for the city. Thank you very much, staff.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I appreciate the 75%. However, we have a lot of needs for in the city. We have a solid waste department that is wanting to expand their facilities. We've already had a small expansion already happen. They need a larger expansion. Our police department is expanding. They need a larger building, more facilities. The study recommended that solid waste and the police department be at 100% of the recommended amount. For years, 7 years, 8 years, solid waste and the police department have been at 42.5%, just like everybody else. It has hurt them in unmeasurable ways. And I really think that we need to increase the solid waste in the police departments back to the recommended amount of 100% until this study comes back for the impact fees and mobility fees. So I don't know if this will work. We're missing 2 commissioners, and I know we need to get moving on things. But I really would like to amend the motion and see if it'll pass with the other 2 that are here, based on the information that I shared.
Well, I'm not going to wait on them to get here, because they knew
Okay.
it was 15 minutes, so.
I'd like to make an amendment to have the fees for solid waste and law enforcement be at 100% for the impact fees until this new study is complete.
Motion dies for lack of a second. Motion on the floor.
It's really unfortunate because there's so much money that is sitting out there, just sitting at the table, not being collected when it should be, for all these years. And I'm glad that we're at 75%, but I really think those 2 areas really should be at the 100. But we didn't get a second, so I have no choice but to go ahead and support the motion, because 75 is better than nothing.
Okay, let's take the vote. That passes.
Can I speak to it?
Yes.
The reason that I did not second is because this is a pretty sizable jump, and I know that it was a compromise among the majority of the commissioners on board. But again, I've worked out those percentages, and even though they wanted, or there was a recommendation for 100%, that 75% was justified in the figures when I worked the math. So I was very comfortable with that.
And I'd
Thank
love
you.
to see us at 100 too. I just want to ease our way up here.
It's a little help for those departments, but that's all right. It passed, it's done. Already been voted on.
Yeah. I have a quick question.
It's already,
It's done.
it's done, ma'am.
I have a question that is not related to that impact fee ordinance. Can we find out if we have a environmental impact fee, or if that was even considered?
We don't have one, and we haven't considered it.
Okay.
There you go. There's your answer.
That's, I mean, that's, I
Straightforward.
needed to know that.
That's about all you can get right there. Straightforward. I appreciate that. City Manager, okay, we're gonna move on to, general business, which is a continued item, discussion possible action regarding Maker's Market ordinance language. City Manager, present the item, please.
Yes, sir. This came before y'all previously. Y'all gave us some general direction. We've got Nicole Gilhouse here to talk about it if you have additional questions, and I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Gilhouse?
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Nicole Gilhouse for the record, I'm Planning Division Manager. So at our last meeting, we were directed to make some changes to the draft ordinance language that was brought to be a quarterly event, to give preference to the City of Northport residents, to include hours of operation, and to limit the staff involvement on it. And so we've made those changes, and we're here for questions.
Commissioner Liu?
Within that also, wasn't it definitely that those quarterly events would be at Dallas White Park?
No, I believe the discussion was to do the first one at Dallas White Park and then to rotate the locations.
Okay, so it wasn't that all of them were going to be there?
No.
Okay, good. That's what I was a little concerned about. Visibility and, I mean, when the other discussions were brought up the other day, that was supposed to be a poor part of town, and I just didn't understand why we'd be putting those people, if it was already considered to be a lesser desirable area for commerce. So, thank you for answering that.
Commissioner Carrison?
Do you know, when was the date that this was discussed? Because I didn't see any minutes to the meetings attached.
February 7th. The final motion was in the agenda item. It was amended a few times. February 7th.
It was what?
February
7th.
And it was, none of that's in the backup?
No, the motion that was made is in the staff summary memo. A vote was taken in the main motion as amended to bring back an amended ordinance to allow a pilot program in Dallas White Park on a quarterly basis to include opening and closing hours, to limit the employee required participation, to only help with scheduling and marking out the area, to make sure said ordinance also allows to expand locations as determined by a commission, to remove the limit of artisans to the area, but to come up with a calculation of maximum artisans per land mass, and add fire department to enforcement in section D, and that residents that are part of the market have first right for 10 days, after which it will be open to any artisans publicly.
And where does it say Dallas White is the first place we'd go?
It's a pilot program to begin at Dallas White Park.
Okay, all right, I didn't hear that, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we've been talking about this for a long time. Is it the intent of this ordinance for the city to run these artisan markets, or is it the intent to have a group of people run this artisan market?
I don't want to speak for Nicole, but the motion looked like it called for minimal staff participation, but go ahead.
Yes, it's minimal staff participation. Basically, they would come in and apply for one of the vendor permits under the draft language. The staff from Parks and Rec would put out a call for vendors. They could come in and apply for that permit. Northport residents first, and after 10 days, other vendors. The Parks and Rec staff, I believe, would go out and mark out the spaces on the site in the morning, but I believe their participation after that would be minimal.
Okay, so who is going to initiate this? So does staff say, hey, we're gonna pick July 1st for an artisan market to be at Dallas White? Or does a citizen say, hey, I'd like to have an artisan market on July 1st?
I believe staff would, the way it's currently being considered, staff would pick the first date.
Okay, so staff is going to initiate the first one, put it all called out, mark it off, okay.
Yeah. It would be about every 3 months.
And is it the intent of staff to bring this back for an ordinance or do it during the ULDC rewrite?
I believe we were going to bring this back as an ordinance.
That's all I have.
Okay. I have no other questioners. I'll entertain a motion. Vice Mayor?
One quick question. Is this in the ULDC or is this in the admin code?
This is in the admin code.
Thank you. Because it depended on how I make the motion. Make a motion to have staff bring back the draft reading as presented to commission for first reading of the actual ordinance.
Second.
Motion on the floor by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Luke. Vice Mayor?
Got nothing.
Commissioner Luke?
This has been going on a long time, so this gets the start going, so I appreciate the time put into it. Thank you.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yeah, I'm torn on this. When I brought this up after the League of Cities, to discuss, the intent was to do what it is that the League of Cities had recommended, and that was to find a permanent fixture area that would just allow folks to set up their wares and to have this maker's market available at all times. They would make their own times, hours. It would be not something that required city involvement. They would have to bring their own electric. You wouldn't have to have staff out there marking areas. And I think that we're just over-regulating what was a simple suggestion that's been done all over the country.
Commissioner Luke?
I was in the same meeting that Commissioner Carazone was in regards to that, and I totally understand, what she's saying. My question about the Dallas White Park thing was in line with what she was saying, because I didn't want it to be the permanent place for it. But I don't mind it traveling around a bit, and they might be able to find where they want their home to be. So I think going at it, allowing them to try a few spots, and then maybe work toward what she and I sat in and heard about. At least this gets it off the ground, so that sort can be developed. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take the vote. That motion passes unanimously.
You changed my mind, Commissioner Luke.
Actually, I didn't change your mind. I just.
No, you really did.
I opened your mind a little bit.
Okay. I do not think we have public comments. We'll move on to commission communications. Commissioner Luke?
Oh, my. Yes. The bill for the CON removal is not accomplished yet, but hopefully by July 1st it will be. I actually would like to see us invite our representative, actually our elected representative of Sarasota Memorial, to maybe come to a workshop or, whenever one of our special meetings or something like that, to talk about some policies and things that are going on. I go to Physicians First, and there are some things that go on actually in our emergency room that I don't really care for the policy. There's no AED in my physician's office. They actually have to call a paramedic, even though my doctor is there, call a paramedic to come take somebody downstairs to the emergency room. Yeah, thank you. I have a list of things. I mean, they're basically handling that hospital as though it's a for-profit, not a not-for-profit. The mission is take care of those who don't have insurance, and more often, they are not, they're not allowed in. The people without insurance aren't allowed, and we pay out about $3 million a year from our city to this hospital. And if they're not performing what they're supposed to be doing for this city, to be so bold as to say, I'm wondering if we want our $3 million given to a hospital that would come and take care of our indigent people. So, I just want to open it up to see if.
I said a while back, I'm tired of giving them money.
I've said it
For
all
lack
along.
of support.
Yeah, me too. So, I mean, as we're looking forward to maybe somebody else coming to our city, I don't know, I guess that's a legal question as to how we might be able to potentially back out or that, I don't know. But again, that would be more tools for the bucket if we were gonna entertain another hospital.
Commissioner, like, unless you're talking about something different, the money that the citizens of the Northport pay is to a hospital district that was established by the legislature that was given the authority to tax the citizens within the county. So that, there's nowhere where the city has authority to intervene or to do something different with that money. It's specific to the hospital district, which is a governmental entity created by the state.
So we would have to go to the state and petition them?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to change
Okay.
the law?
Thank you, I'll do that. But I still wouldn't mind accountability going on. I mean, when's the last time you had you had our South County board member talk to any of us? I mean.
Who is it?
His name is Darrell Henry.
My point.
Exactly, you have to look it up. And the email addresses, I don't even know if it goes to them, because I've been writing emails and I never get a response. I've taken some of the issues that I have with their policies even to their president, and I'm not getting any response. So I wouldn't mind asking these guys to come chit-chat with us and hold they're elected officials, hold their feet to the fire as to what they do.
The board, okay. 'Cause
Yeah,
I think
the
we
board.
asked the CEO and the hospital to come before, and they told us flat out, no.
That was the president, we had to go up there, yep.
It's a good possibility. I'm okay with asking.
Yep,
I
doesn't
wouldn't
hurt to
expect much, but I'd ask.
So we have a consensus for that.
It might be our school.
Yeah, the hospital board, yeah.
Just ask the hospital district board to come in a joint meeting, right? Or, I would say a joint meeting.
Just, yep, we're fine.
Hold up.
Joint meeting or what?
I thought it was one rep, but now.
Thank
I
you.
know, but I have to say that I, knowing the board, would suggest the whole board.
Well, even, I don't
I mean, if you can
mind
get the
putting
whole
it
board,
out
that'd be
to
great.
our rep. There are 2 at-large members also. Why not invite them? Because they're at-large. But we do have a district, gentlemen, actually 2. Carter is south too. So that's a total of 4 of those board members that you could invite because they do have jurisdiction within our city.
Again, the board, a special joint meeting.
Okay,
I'll say yes.
okay. So for the board, a joint meeting. Okay?
Yes?
Okay, that's consensus.
Thank you.
Can I expand on that? So since we're on the topic of SMH and taxes paid, maybe we can get a consensus for the city attorney to see about how would we go about petitioning our state legislature to remove us paying the
I
taxes.
think that's a lobbyist issue.
I would also ask, what is the criteria for taxation without a certain representation?
Representation. Tea
So,
party.
so where would this apply? I know they provide an emergency center, but is that truly representation?
Because we still have city of
I
Northport
couldn't say
residents.
because the city of Northport's not a taxpayer. So as an entity, we don't have standing as a taxpayer.
Oh, so we wouldn't have standing to say, hey, Well, we would have standing to say our
Well,
people are being
Yeah.
attacked for things that they're not represented.
Done it before.
Wouldn't we? You don't
I
think
could be
legally?
wrong, but
we
I
have-
know, I don't think so.
Did it in our, impact fees.
Could we maybe,
That's why I'm asking for
could
the
we
city
maybe
attorney
see
to
if,
look at
yeah, could we
getting
maybe
us some
see if
information
maybe you
about
could
that.
look and see if there's anything out there like?
I agree.
I'd just like
Just
to,
look at it.
I'd just like to know what's
To see
out
if we
there.
have standing to sue the hospital district?
Well, I mean, just standing to, I mean, I'm not necessarily putting on record I want to sue the hospital, but, I mean, I would like to look.
Sure I would.
Well, I know, I just want to look at, exactly what I asked. What are our taxpayers, are we being represented for the taxes that our taxpayers are actually, providing out there? And if we're not, is there any recourse we have?
I can't provide a legal opinion or advice that would relate to individual taxpayers.
Well, but as a city, can we look at, as a city
I think it'd be
entity,
stats.
protecting our citizens? Because that's what we're here to do,
What he's
too.
trying to say is, as the first point of question is, do we have standing? If we have standing, then we need to find out what avenue, if there is one.
Yeah, do we have
that
any
to
pressure
go
that we can
down.
put?
Right.
Sure. That's a consensus of the board.
Yeah.
We have to look into
Can
that.
I get it?
Even without that, the accountability of stats, they're supposed to be taking care of our internet care. So what is that? What's the percentage?
Yeah,
You
I'd
know,
love to.
is that 3 million
So
a
these
year
data points.
actually being paid out for these purposes? You know, are we utilizing that? I would like to see the stats and the proof that the 3 million is being used within our city.
But to get that,
It
man,
is,
you
it
need this
is.
whole process to,
Different thing,
yeah, that might be, I mean, I guess we could ask for it, but if they don't provide it, then that would be part of this whole
Public record
process.
request.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
yeah. Well, what they're gonna say, like they've said in the past, is we can't break that down.
Of course.
Right. Which then will take this process if it gets.
Well,
to that
according to their report, Medicare is supposed to be, within that too, and they have the data. It's there, I saw it in their annual report.
So do I have a consensus to
Yes.
have our
Any
legal look
information-
into that and see if there's any? Okay, we have a consensus. Amber, you good, or do I need Vanessa to explain it for me? Because I have a hard time getting that across.
I don't think we need any further translation.
All right, all right.
Okay,
Commissioner Lee.
but the,
Take it a step
but
further.
of course, no, anytime. I have been in a lot of meetings concerning water quality again, that panel that we went to. I went to Kona last night, and I also attended the Myakka River Management Council also. They, in that meeting, are supporting looking at the statewide stormwater rule, that we set that resolution for, and so there's still progress going on. Margaret Good is going to be revamping her bill so that it goes through again, but just to give you guys heads up, there's still movement going on with that statewide stormwater resolution. Just heads up, during the budget period, I would really like to see if we could get the figures for the overhead for our family service building. Our building over on Pan American houses services with tenants, not just us, but with tenants. And they charge $14 a square foot for the rent of those offices. I know they had to go in and do a study previous in order to come up with square foot, because it was just arbitrarily one person paying one thing, another person another. But I wouldn't mind seeing an update to what the actual overhead cost for that building is, to make sure the tenants are not being overcharged. Right now, the Loveland Center would really like to expand their services, but it would probably turn that organization upside down financially. So I would like to see the breakdown of what the overhead is for that building, so we know that we're fairly charging these people and not making it too much.
Thank you, Commissioner, because in 2011, I asked that same exact question. $13 to $14 a square foot is commercial prices. And the study that you speak of is just an average of what rental space in commercial properties was. There was no true
That
cost
is the
comparison.
way that I was reading it too. The study
Yeah.
was looking at commercial entities and what the rent was in comparable. But that's not what services should be about. Services should be about providing to the public. No, we should not be paying all the overhead for an organization, but we shouldn't be charging them as though they were renting
profit.
from a commercial property. It should be services that we're looking at. So I don't know if and I just wanted heads up to the staff that I'm gonna be asking that, but I don't know if you want a consensus from the board that they actually do that and bring it back to us at budget time.
Never hurts.
I'm a
I
yes.
would- Absolutely.
Yes, double yes.
Well, that's consensus.
We'll try to bring it.
And then another heads up during budget time, I definitely want to talk about the tree fund, of what is written currently, what has been happening, and I think we just need to reel in what we're supposed to be doing within that, but just to give heads up to staff that I'll definitely be addressing that issue during budget.
We've
To
been
that
notified.
effect, can we get some history on that, as
Sure.
in the
Expenditure
amendments
history?
through the years,
Sure.
you know?
Actually, it was pulled in public record request by Alice White, and so it has already been pulled. It shows what all the money's been spent on.
No, I'm talking about the changes to the ordinance itself.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Oh,
misunderstood.
okay, yeah, I misunderstood also.
Ordinance itself, because I
Over
can,
the time period.
I would say since its inception, which was '06, I wanna say, because I can tell you what it is now is not what the intent was when we put it in place. '06, maybe '05.
To the tree fund you're talking about? Okay, that's a good point,
I'm a yes.
yes,
Yes. That's across the board. We have a consensus.
I'm done.
Commissioner McDowell?
Yeah. So I guess at May 28th's meeting, I disclosed I had ex parte communication for the West Villages Phase 8. Actually, I did not have any ex parte communication for Phase 8 on that particular item. I actually confused it with the West Villages Comp Plan Amendment. So I needed to correct that ex parte communication on the record. So there, done. All right. So it's my understanding that the state is starting their committees for legislative sessions in like September-ish, and that the actual legislation is going to start convening in January because it's an election year, so they do it a little bit sooner. I'd like to see about talking about our legislative priorities like in July, so that way then we can get those legislative priorities finalized and concise, change the format so that our legislators actually read our legislative priorities instead of having a book. And I'd like to see about getting a consensus to,
I already asked that request a month ago to the city manager, and I thought that was somewhere on the agenda.
Maybe.
It was like at least a month ago.
But if you want to go ahead and give us consensus now that you're here, I mean.
On what topic?
legislative priorities are state legislative priorities because the committee starts in September and actual legislative session starts in January. And I think it would be good to be able to communicate our priorities ahead of time.
I'm a yes. Like I said, I think I asked for July, like.
Well, we'll
but
have
that
to
was
do
like
it in
a
July.
month ago.
We'll have to do it in July. So I'm a yes if you need a
I'm a yes.
consensus.
Yes. Yep, so let's cross the board.
Yeah.
All right, so if we're talking about budget, Chief Garrison, don't hurt me. I'd really like to see some information about vehicles taking home. How many vehicles get to go home? How far is home? How far do they get to travel? And I'd like to see some data on that, and I'd actually like to see the policy on police vehicles traveling home. So I assume that this is more than just one commissioner asking, so I'm hoping that I can get a consensus on that for just information for budget talk.
I'm fine with it.
Your son?
Oh, I'm a big no, because I don't support taking that away, because it's been a very large tool in a toolbox. It's something that the officers have really supported. It was taken away at some point, brought back in, thank God.
Community peace. is part of it.
And I'm not messing with it.
The problem is it used to be X amount of miles, and that X
Still
amount
is.
of, no, it's not, it changed. That's what I'd like to get some information on. I believe that the city manager, I just basically would like the information on the entire policy, how many vehicles go home, how far do they go home, so that we can evaluate it correctly. That's all I'm looking for.
Okay, Chief Todd Garrison for the police department. Our policy has not changed. The policy is 20 miles outside of the
Thank you.
city boundaries, and all of our vehicles are take-home vehicles for law enforcement.
But it's my understanding there is a provision that allows the city manager to allow them to take it home further than 20 miles.
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my
It was
knowledge.
discussed during budget talk, I believe it was last year, so.
Well, the members are allowed to use their vehicles if they're traveling to an out-of-town school or, you know, something like that. They are allowed to take their city vehicle.
Or conference, something like that.
Right.
I'm not talking about that.
Traveling to the jail.
I'm not talking about that.
But as far as exercising the provision outside of the 20 mile, that hasn't been, since I've been chief of police, that has not been provided.
Is there a consensus? Do y'all have one? Not have one?
Well, actually, Emmerich, what did you say?
Yeah, I had said yes for information. But within the 20 miles, I always thought back in the day it was within city limits, but if it's changed.
Thank you.
No,
changed
but if
back
it
in
changed,
the
and
06
I'm not
era.
aware of all the changes that had taken place, I think 20 miles is reasonable. So I would, if
city
you want
is-
the information, I could say yes, but to go against this program, I would say no.
I'd just like to get a better
That's just
understanding.
where I'm at on that.
The reason why I'm asking is I'd like to get a better understanding because I'm hearing different things. City limits 20 miles and city manager can
Well,
say.
city manager, this is something that you can provide Commissioner McDowell, correct? With the information. I don't need it, so I mean, I'm okay.
Okay, so,
I'm okay with the
okay,
program.
we'll get you number of vehicles, number of miles, and, do you want number of miles even though, now that, if it's 20 miles and it doesn't exceed that? Or do you want,
I'd-
because we're talking about staff time, is what I'm.
That's why I'm
get at.
trying to get a consensus for you to expend staff time. Like I said, I'm looking for how many vehicles go home, what is the actual policy,
Okay.
and then how far is home? So is it in city limits, is it within 20 miles, is it wherever they need to go? I'm
Well,
not
that
talking
we can
about
answer easy,
conferences.
But if you want us to sit down and calculate
Every individual.
every individual's home address, and that's gonna take staff time. But if the policy says within city limits or within 20 miles, or some exemption above that 20 miles, we can easily give you that.
I think
Okay.
you're looking for those that are outside the city limit that take their stuff home within the,
Right, and the members
Area.
that live outside of the city within that 20-mile range, they do
Right.
park at fire stations within that 20-mile range.
so she wants all those names, or
So
rather
the
numbers.
policy is 20 miles outside of the city limits,
Mhm.
wherever the crow flies, that's as the crow flies,
It's a radius.
as a radius. From
Mhm.
whatever point that city touches is where that radius extends.
So if somebody lives out in the West Villages, they get 20 miles south or north of the West Villages boundary?
Any part of the city line
Yeah, I'd like to see the policy, please.
is
Okay,
20
we'll get you the
miles.
policy,
Thank you.
and we'll get you the number of
Perfect.
vehicles.
Who cares for?
So you say,
You
so,
got
so if they took, let's say they live in Englewood, they're parking it at a fire station in Englewood rather than at their homestead?
Yeah,
If
'cause
they're
they're
outside of
beyond
the
20.
20-mile range, then yes, they
Then
have
they'll-
to park it at a fire station and government facility.
Now, is
Within that
like an
20 miles.
Now, is that an interlocal, you guys gotta get in, or is that a phone call you make? How's that work?
Yes, it's a phone call.
So that's within the 20 miles. So if they lived past that, they would stop at that 20-mile marker and then take their own vehicle. Okay, I got you, I understand.
Okay.
Because it just didn't make sense to me to drive to Englewood to park at a fire station
Is
rather
that-
than just going home.
Isn't that right on Unicode?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. But we'll
It's a city policy.
It's a
Vice Mayor?
city policy that the commission,
Yes, it was.
Vice Mayor, you have some
brought-
more?
Yes.
No, I'm just, so are you going,
I'll get you that, yeah.
so it's just coming to me,
Yeah, what I'm gonna get you is the policy, I'm gonna get you the number of vehicles.
that go home?
Go home, period, not just PD.
And if
period.
there's anything that the city manager has given
If
a
there's an
waiver
exemption.
on,
But that would, I assume that would be in the policy.
and I'd like that in time for budget, thank you, if that's possible. Because I know
You
that's
got it.
next week, I can't help it, we just got the books.
I got it.
Thank
We-
you.
We all over it.
I'm done.
I have nothing, Commissioner Carrington. Commissioner Emmerich? No. We wanna move on to administrative and legal, city manager.
It's exciting times. We've got the Police Academy, the Citizens Academy graduation coming up Friday night. We've got the accreditation folks down here for the Parks and Rec Department. For those of you who RSVP'd, hopefully we'll see you at the Tiki Hut on Wednesday night. Carrie, did I miss anything?
Warm Middle Springs Day.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you so much. Warm Mineral Springs Day is coming up on, I apologize, I'm drawing blank.
Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
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 Can we
Yep.
get something out on social media to blast that?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Because I
And
know
that's all-
Tuesday's a funky kind of day, but
That's all I can think of right now, but these are exciting times.
Awesome.
thank you.
City attorney.
No report, Mayor.
Actually, I do. Just real quick, we took in the city clerk's office, got the kiosk outside now for citizens, if they want to look at the agenda, they can do it online instead of us printing out the whole agenda packet. And if they want copies of anything, they can just ask Sue and we'll print it out for them.
Nice.
So that's it.
Is there a charge for that printout?
We haven't discussed that yet.
Okay, and that's it? We're adjourned. I saw you jump. I saw your hand do like that. He's like, I was watching. I saw that thumb kick out there like, whoa.
alert to not jumping.